Chapter 168. While Han Shuo and Emily were leading Belinda towards the dark mantle base, a flying insect the size of a housefly that had been circling the hotel was following Han Shuo and Emily from afar. The demon's lair edge suddenly flashed and pierced a flying insect with its sharp tip, bringing it to Han Shuo's palm. Upon closer inspection, Han Shuo discovered that this flying insect had the same appearance as the golem that Belinda had released. They were both forged from metal armor, the only difference being that one was extremely large while the other was extremely small. Magical yuan circulated in his palm, and Han Shuo's thumb and index finger squeezed tightly. A crisp crack rang out as the flying insect was crushed. Han Shuo's eyes narrowed as he discovered that there was an extremely small magical matrix within the stomach of the crushed flying insect. There was a faintly discernible existence of magical elements within. This calamity church is a bit miraculous, all right, to be able to set up a magical matrix within such a small flying insect golem. Han Shuo couldn't help but sigh emotionally as he put away the flying insect golem. Nodding, Emily was very much in agreement with Han Shuo's words. She said with lingering fear, "The Calamity Church is the most evil of all churches. They have all sorts of evil magic and secret arts within them. Look at this golem that looks like an evil god today. If we could mass-produce them, then our empire's cavalry wouldn't even have the slightest chance of resisting the charge of these armored golems." As expected of someone who'd been influenced by the Dark Mantle, Emily's first thought was still the safety of the empire. She didn't consider what benefits these golems could bring her. "I'll take care of these flying insect golems first so that they don't follow us all the way to the Dark Mantle base. It'll be bad if we're discovered." Han Shuo activated the demon's lair edge and used his mind to control it to charge into the center of the flying insect golems, destroying all of them in the blink of an eye. After the small golems were destroyed, Han Shuo and Emily didn't linger and returned to the Dark Mantle base in the dead of the night. In the secret room that Han Shuo had stayed in 2 days ago, Han Shuo had placed Belinda on a chair and had Emily tie her to the chair with ropes. The unconscious Belinda's hands and feet were tied to the chair, and she couldn't feel anything at all. She was at Emily's mercy. When Emily had tied her up, she couldn't help but look at the veil covering Belinda's face. She asked in confusion, "Why does this girl keep her face veiled? Is there something wrong with her?" Shrugging his shoulders, Han Shuo smiled and said, "There are only 3 possibilities for a woman to wear a veil on her face. Either she's too beautiful and is afraid that her appearance will put her in danger, or it's because of the special customs of some races, or there's a flaw on her face that she doesn't want others to see. I'm also very curious which one this woman belongs to, but she's our prisoner now. I think you can take off her veil and take a look." Emily couldn't help but glare at her when she heard Han Shuo's words. She spoke in a strange tone. "Oh, I didn't know that you know so much about veils and whether women wear them or not." Han Shuo laughed involuntarily and hastened to explain, "This has nothing to do with me. It's because I received Clarendon's memories that I know about this." Snorting lightly, Emily didn't say anything else. She reached out and grabbed the veil covering Belinda's face, slowly pulling it down. The unconscious Belinda's completely unconcealed features were gradually revealed. Slender crescent brows lined her smooth forehead, and long eyelashes covered her tightly shut eyes. With Emily's actions, Belinda's tall and straight nose was slowly revealed. Her skin was fair and clear, and she was a stunning silhouette no matter how one looked at it. It was a pity that when the veil was completely removed, Han Shuo and Emily suddenly saw a dark blue birthmark on Belinda's left cheek. This dark blue birthmark appeared on Belinda's left cheek, making her originally beautiful face look a bit sinister and frightening. You guessed correctly, she does have a natural defect. If it wasn't for this dark blue birthmark, this woman would be a great beauty through and through. What a pity. Emily looked Belinda up and down and spoke to Han Shuo with some regret after pulling down Belinda's veil. Oval cheeks, a high-nosed bridge, rosy lips, slender crescent brows, and a pair of starry eyes that shone like sapphires. She also had fair and clear skin and a lithe and graceful figure. These were all characteristics that a beauty should have. It was a pity that the dark blue birthmark on her left cheek was too eye-catching. Anyone who saw it would focus most of their attention on it. This immediately formed a strong contrast and completely destroyed a beauty. All right, I've woken her up. Han Shua's expression was the same as usual, and he didn't particularly care about this woman's beauty or ugliness. He walked behind the chair and placed a hand on the back of her neck, squeezing the tendons there with a bit of force. He then patted her right cheek and called out, "You're awake?" Belinda's skin was smooth and silky. When Han Shua had woken her up, it was quite comfortable to the touch when he pinched her smooth skin. It was as if he was touching expensive silk. Belinda's long eyelashes fluttered a few times when she heard Han Shua's actions. Her clear, starry eyes opened, and she first looked around in confusion, then looked at Emily and Han Shua with surprise. The confusion in her eyes immediately faded as Belinda quickly recognized the situation she was in. A cold light flashed through her clear eyes, but her voice was still soft and threatening. "Who are you to dare capture me? Our Calamity Church will not let you off. You will regret what you've done today." "You don't need to worry about that. Just what is your Calamity Church's purpose in appearing in Valen City this time? Apart from assassinating Clark, what other schemes do you have?" Emily looked coldly at Belinda and interrogated her. "Do you think I'll tell you? I think you're wasting your efforts." Belinda looked disdainfully at Emily and said mockingly. Belinda suddenly thought of something when she saw the veil in Emily's hand. Her gentle voice became sharp for the first time as she glared angrily at Emily with a bit of panic. She said loudly, "You'll pay the price for taking off my veil." Han Shua watched for a while and walked up to Belinda with a bit of impatience. He said in a cold voice, "Tell me your objective this time, or I'll leave a large mark on your tender right cheek." Belinda's expression changed when she heard these words, and then she giggled loudly. "You'll pay the price." Belinda's ruddy face suddenly paled, and her body stiffened in an extremely short amount of time. Even her breathing became very slow. When she closed her eyes, she seemed to have fainted again, and all the functions of her body seemed to enter a dormant state. Han Shua, who'd been prepared to torture a confession, was flabbergasted. He smiled wryly at Emily and said, "She seems to have taken some kind of medicine and suddenly fainted again. This method of fainting through medicine is a bit troublesome. What do you think we should do?" Emily came over and cast a dark magic into Belinda's body. Emily then closed her eyes and thought for a bit. She could only shake her head and sigh lowly. "The Calamity Church is a bit difficult to deal with, all right. She's fainted so suddenly. No amount of torture will work if we don't wake her up. What do you think we should do?" Han Shua spread out his hands and retreated, speaking helplessly to Emily. After thinking for a bit, Emily responded, "I'll first report this matter to the higher-ups and see what decision they make. In addition, notify the forest troll that the siege equipment that can be sold to merchants seems to have been secretly transported to Valen City. I need to go out and see if I can find any concrete evidence." "Then, what should I do?" Han Shua asked. "Hehe, there's nothing for you to do for now. Do whatever you want. I'll notify you immediately if anything happens." Emily looked at Han Shua with a smile. Nodding, Han Shua said, "That's fine as well. I'll stay in this secret room and start studying advanced necromancy magic. In addition, I'll see if I can find a way to wake this Belinda up and get some information out of her." Emily was about to leave when she suddenly thought of something and turned back to glare at Han Shua. "That's up to you. But behave yourself and don't take advantage of my absence to eat Belinda. I'm not the type of person to take advantage of others when they're down. Don't worry." Han Shua smiled wryly. "Humph, you're still denying it? How would I have fallen for you if you weren't this type of person?" Emily glared fiercely at Han Shua and then thought of something. She chuckled. "However, that dark blue birthmark on Belinda's face will probably affect your mood. I don't think I have anything to worry about." After saying that, Emily seemed to be a little pleased with herself. She chuckled and left the place at ease. Chapter 169. Due to Han Shua's advancement to the true demon realm, not only had his magical yuan advanced by leaps and bounds in recent times, but Han Shua's mental strength had also advanced by leaps and bounds due to the strengthening of his brain. Han Shua had already become proficient in the few spells that should be grasped in journeyman necromancy magic. After obtaining all of Clarendon's memories, Han Shua's understanding of necromancy magic had taken a large step forward. Han Shua had directly obtained many difficult and abstruse magical knowledge through Clarendon's decades of experience, and his progress in magic was tremendous. Now, Han Shua could feel that his mental strength was even stronger than before. Since he had grasped all journeyman magics, Han Shua planned on advancing to the next level. His agreement with Fanny was that he would only be able to officially date her after he became an adept mage. This was a very strong motivation for Han Shua. Taking advantage of his free time, Han Shua stayed in the Dark Mantle's secret room and continued to meditate and comprehend Clarendon's understanding of advanced magic. After Han Shua's repeated practice and grasped the advanced magic of acid bog, Han Shua felt that he had used up too much of his mental strength and temporarily stopped practicing. At this moment, Han Shua's eyes swiveled as he stared at Belinda, who had fainted from the potion. His thoughts raced as Han Shua involuntarily walked to Belinda's side. After thinking for a moment, Han Shua put a hand on Belinda's back and circulated his magical yuan. A thread of magical yuan slowly entered Belinda's body. It was because of the cruel training of his body and the repeated reforging of it that Han Shua had become very familiar with the structure of the human body. Han Shua focused his attention as the magical yuan entered Belinda's body. He could feel the trajectory of the magical yuan circulation. When Han Shua calmed his mind and began to do this, he quickly discovered that there was a numbing potion in Belinda's body. It was like an anesthetic that could stimulate a person's nerves and make them lose consciousness in an instant, making it difficult for them to wake up. When Han Shua sensed the effects of this medicine, he calmed his mind and slowly circulated his magical yuan through Belinda's body. The magical yuan absorbed the medicine and slowly gathered it in Han Shua's palm. As he was doing this, Han Shua suddenly saw the dark blue birthmark on Belinda's left cheek. His heart moved. Han Shua's magical yuan flowed into the birthmark. When the magical yuan entered, Han Shua could clearly feel that there was another strange substance within the dark green birthmark. However, this substance had completely melded with the skin of Belinda's face, so it would be a bit troublesome to extract it. After all, this kind of dark blue birthmark should have been fused with Belinda's face since birth, unlike the unconscious medicine that had entered her body in a very short amount of time. Although there was a way, Belinda's beauty had nothing to do with him. In addition, doing this would expend a lot of his magical yuan, so Han Shua naturally wouldn't help Belinda with her beauty. When the anesthetic in Belinda's body was almost completely absorbed, Han Shua knew that she would wake up soon. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way to interrogate the awakened Belinda. An idea suddenly floated into his mind, and Han Shua chuckled coldly. A ball of purple flame danced on the fingertip of his left hand, and he used the demon's lair edge to cut open his index finger, dripping a drop of blood into the little purple flame. When this drop of Han Shua's blood landed on the purple flame, the little ball of purple flame suddenly flared with blinding light and then shrank to the size of a pinky fingernail. Under Han Shua's mental manipulation, this little ball of purple flame abruptly sank into the back of Belinda's neck, becoming a small black mole. Having reached the true demon realm in magical cultivation, Han Shua could use secret demonic arts to form a mysterious connection with the blood essence within his body. Using a secret method, Han Shua had sealed a cloud of mystical frost within the drop of blood essence. Through this drop of blood essence, Han Shua could use the demon infant to control the degree of coldness of the mystical frost. As long as Han Shua was willing, the demon infant could activate the blood essence and allow the mystical frost to invade Belinda's body, instantly dictating her life and death. In addition, within a certain distance, Han Shua could also sense Belinda's location through this drop of blood essence. Because of the loss of a drop of blood essence, Han Shua knew that Belinda would wake up in a short amount of time after doing all this. He made good use of the time and sat down cross-legged nearby, silently circulating his magical yuan to quickly recover. The blood essence was near the demon infant and existed to nourish it. Every drop contained the magical yuan that Han Shua had trained so hard. Some special magical arts required blood essence as a primer. Blood essence was just as important to a demonic practitioner as the demon infant. One wouldn't easily lose too much blood essence. Otherwise, it would cause the demonic arts to regress at best, or cause one to go berserk at worst, destroying both body and soul. However, the loss of a drop of blood essence naturally wouldn't cause any serious problems. As long as one trained diligently, one would be able to completely recover in a day. A soft hum suddenly sounded from the side after a while. Han Shuo, who had been meditating in silence, could sense that Belinda was awakening even with his eyes closed. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and her bright eyes began to take in her surroundings. There were a few lamps burning on the walls of the secret room, so Belinda could clearly see everything when she looked around. Apart from being sufficiently spacious, there weren't any special decorations in the secret room. Han Shuo, who was sitting indifferently in a remote corner, immediately drew all of Belinda's attention. Han Shuo had a solemn expression on his face. His handsome face was chiseled, and he sat coldly with his back ramrod straight. He looked extremely masculine. Pouting, Belinda exhaled softly and tugged at the ropes on her body. She discovered that it would be very difficult to free herself from them. Her quick-witted eyes darted back and forth, as if contemplating something. "You'd better not act rashly. Otherwise, I'll immediately kill you if I notice anything amiss." Still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, Han Shuo spoke with a cold face when he heard the sound of the rope rubbing against each other. Han Shuo's sudden words startled Belinda. She glared angrily at Han Shuo and said, "Just who are you? What enmity does the Calamity Church have with you? Why do you have to hold me captive?" Taking a deep breath, Han Shuo opened his deep eyes and flicked a glance at Belinda. He took out the white bone staff that he'd obtained from Clarendon from his space ring and said faintly, "Alchemist Belinda of the Calamity Church, work number 17. You personally refined this white bone staff. I obtained it from Clarendon after killing him. It's very useful. I have to thank you." "So it was you who killed Clarendon. It looks like you're one of Griffin Legion Commander Bob Asher's men." Belinda's gaze first focused on the white bone staff and landed on Han Shuo after a while. Shaking his head, Han Shuo responded, "I'm not a member of the Griffin Legion. On the contrary, I have some history with them. If it wasn't for my help when Clarendon tried to assassinate Clark, Clark might not have died. It was just that Claude killed everyone he saw, and I accidentally saw him summon the three-eyed demon god Ansi-Desi. He wanted to kill me, so I had no choice but to retaliate." "You're really not one of Bob Asher's men?" Belinda was first quite surprised when she heard Han Shuo say that he wasn't a member of the Griffin Legion, and then hurriedly questioned Han Shuo. "Of course, you're my prisoner now. There's no need for me to lie to you at this time." Han Shuo nodded his head affirmatively and said lowly, "You said just now that you tried to assassinate Clark. This means that you're also enemies with Bob Asher?" Belinda's usually gentle voice grew a bit high-pitched as she looked at Han Shuo and asked urgently, clearly a bit excited. Nodding his head again, Han Shuo responded with a slight smile, "That's right. To be precise, Clark died by my hands and not Clarendon. I've come to Valence City this time to deal with Bob Asher." "That's wonderful. Since our goals are the same, I think we shouldn't be enemies. The Griffin Legion is so large in Valence City. I think it'll be easier for us to achieve our goals if we work together." Belinda's face was full of joy as she looked at Han Shuo with great interest. "But I killed Clarendon and 3 of your Calamity Church's magical swordsmen just now. What should we do?" Although Han Shuo had long since made up his mind, he was still a bit surprised to hear Belinda speak so readily. Sacrifices are unavoidable in order to achieve anything. A few deaths are no big deal. As long as we work together to deal with the Griffin Legion, I promise that we can forget our past enmity. Belinda spoke very carelessly, not caring at all about the lives of her own people. Han Shuo was a bit surprised by this attitude of disregarding her own people, but seeing that his goals had been achieved, he chuckled. If that's the case, then that's wonderful. Chapter 170. When Emily returned to the secret room and saw that Han Shuo and Belinda were chatting cheerfully and wittily, she was flabbergasted. Her shifty eyes roamed over Han Shuo and Belinda, and finally pulled Han Shuo over to ask suspiciously, "You didn't really sleep with her, did you?" Han Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he quickly shook his head and explained, "Of course not. Miss Belinda's target is also the commander of the Griffin Legion. Miss Belinda can completely disregard our previous conflicts and is willing to work with us to deal with Bob Asher. I feel that it's beneficial for both sides to work together, so I agreed. You agreed just like that and even released her restraints? Emily was stunned as she stared at Han Shuo. Casting a glance at Emily, Han Shuo smiled calmly and said to Belinda, "This place is a bit special. Although we can work together, there should still be some secrets between us. If Miss Belinda doesn't mind, I'd like to blindfold you and let you go." Of course, I completely understand. Belinda was quite straightforward and agreed without the slightest bit of hesitation. He covered Belinda's eyes again and put her veil back on as well. Han Shuo took Belinda away from the dark mantle stronghold under Emily's astonished gaze and took a carriage to a faraway place before letting Belinda alight. He said, "When you've contacted your people, you can find us at the place we agreed upon. We can then discuss the details of our cooperation in detail." I'm very happy to meet you," Belinda said gently and left the carriage. Emily hastily asked as soon as Belinda's figure had left, "What's going on? Why did you let her go just like that?" After quickly explaining the situation, Han Shuo said to Emily, "Forcing her to confess may not be effective, but if we let her go like this, we can obtain more useful information. If she does anything harmful to us, I can immediately take her life with a thought, so you don't have to worry about anything. She'll ask for help from the Calamity Church after she leaves. Only by cooperating with them will we be able to obtain more useful information and join forces to deal with Bob Asher. Isn't this killing two birds with one stone? Do you know that what you are doing is extremely dangerous? The Calamity Church is different from ordinary forces. If we are not careful, not only will all our previous efforts be in vain, we may even pay with our lives. You are playing with fire." After listening to Han Shuo's explanation, Emily still couldn't let it go and said with a sigh, all right. I know what I'm doing. Sometimes, it's necessary to take risks out of desperation. Only when there's a big crisis will there be a big opportunity. We can handle it." At this point, Han Shuo paused and asked Emily, "Right, you went out just now. Did you obtain any useful information?" "That Phoebe who brought you to the finance minister's banquet arrived in Valence City the day before yesterday. You definitely can't imagine why she's here." Emily creased her brow when she saw that Han Shuo was asking about serious matters. Starting, Han Shuo asked Emily with some surprise, "What is she doing in Valence City?" Because of the McGrady Merchant Guild's failure last time, Asher didn't continue to trust them and found Phoebe. As the owner of the buzzed Merchant Guild, Bob Asher promised to transport that batch of siege equipment at a high price. Unbeknownst to her, she was enticed by the high interest and used her Merchant Guild's channels to avoid a few towns and deliver the equipment to Valence City. Who would have thought that she'd actually succeed? She's already arrived in Valence City with the equipment. If there aren't any accidents, it'll be delivered to the Griffin Legion tomorrow. Emily smiled ruefully as she explained. Han Shuo's mind raced when these words were spoken, and he suddenly said, "Then will Phoebe be implicated in this matter?" "That's hard to say. If she knows what this batch of equipment is and still insists on helping Bob Asher, then even I will find it hard to cover up this matter. But if she doesn't know anything and has been completely kept in the dark by Bob Asher, then there's still room to maneuver." Emily thought for a moment and responded to Han Shuo, "Where does Phoebe live right now? I need to go see her immediately." Han Shuo's brow furrowed as he stared at Emily and asked lowly. Pouting, Emily glared at Han Shuo and said huffily, "And you say that you have nothing to do with her? You don't know how worried you are when you hear that she's in danger. I need her to help me with a lot of my materials. Can't anything happen to her? Hurry up and tell me her address." Han Shuo hugged Emily and forcefully kissed her, smiling cheekily as he begged. Snorting lightly, Emily pinched Han Shuo fiercely before telling him Phoebe's address. When she saw that Han Shuo was about to leave, she couldn't help but remind, "There are soldiers of the Griffin Legion guarding the hotel that Emily lives in. You must be careful and don't let anything happen to you." "Thank you for your concern. I'll take good care of myself even if it's for you." Han Shuo chuckled lightly and shot out of the carriage like a cheetah, heading swiftly for Phoebe's hotel. The hotel that Phoebe lived in was on a street that had just entered the city. When Han Shuo arrived, he discovered that there were indeed many soldiers of the Griffin Legion in the surroundings. It looked like they were very concerned about the items that Phoebe was transporting. It was already the latter half of the night, and the sky would probably brighten soon. This was the time when one was the most sleepy. Han Shuo noticed that the soldiers responsible for guarding the hotel were all involuntarily dozing off. Their mental states weren't very good. Taking advantage of the night, Han Shuo deployed the art of the demonic ninth heavens and flew into the air. From an extremely high altitude, he slowly landed on the roof of the hotel. It had to be said that the Dark Mantle's information network was powerful. Not only had Emily been able to find out where Phoebe was staying as soon as she'd entered the city, she'd even investigated which room she was staying in. The last room on the west side was the most secluded, and also the most expensive room in the hotel. There were 3 Griffin Legion soldiers standing guard around it. Han Shuo landed on the roof and observed for a bit. Taking advantage of one of the people dozing off, he used the hidden force of his magical yuan to open a window from the inside and snuck in without a sound. This room was sufficiently spacious and had its own living room, bathroom, and bedroom. It was the time when people were sound asleep, so it was only natural that Phoebe would be in the bedroom. Han Shuo held his breath and focused his mind as he quietly and slowly walked towards the bedroom, not making the slightest sound. There was a large, soft bed under a purple gauze canopy. The stove next to it was burning with charcoal, warming up the bedroom. A figure was lying on her side on the large, soft bed, wrapped in a thin silk blanket. Her long hair was scattered and her fair, bare shoulders were exposed. She was moaning softly as if she were dreaming. Silently walking to Phoebe's window, Han Shuo twisted his body and lifted the purple gauze canopy, moving closer to Phoebe. Han Shuo was just about to wake Phoebe up when he suddenly heard a low moan. He then heard Phoebe's fragrant lips softly murmur, "Oh, don't, big bad guy. Brian, you big bad guy." Han Shuo was startled and thought that Phoebe had discovered him. He couldn't help but climb up a bit to look at Phoebe, only to find that Phoebe's eyes were tightly shut and her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. She was moaning softly, and a pair of hands under the thin blanket seemed to be rubbing his body. She was actually having a wet dream, and the male lead was actually him. Han Shuo was flabbergasted as he stared at Phoebe in shock. At this time, Phoebe's cheeks and neck were flushed. Her seductive tongue was gently licking her red cherry lips. Her hands were wandering between her chest and abdomen under the blanket. She was moaning softly and calling his name from time to time. Such a soul-stirring temptation was presented in front of him. Han Shuo only felt his mouth dry, and his lower body immediately raised. Han Shuo, who originally planned to immediately wake Phoebe up, completely forgot about all the messy things at this time. His body slowly fell onto Phoebe's big bed, and he even lifted a corner of the blanket and burrowed in. From the back, he was lying on his side like Phoebe. Han Shuo's raised lower body directly penetrated into the curve of Phoebe's buttocks. Through the thin clothes, Han Shuo could even feel the wet and slippery curve of Phoebe's buttocks. This kind of strong stimulation, no man could withstand it. With a low gasp, Han Shuo reached out and climbed onto Phoebe's firm and full breasts from behind. He rubbed them through the thin silk clothes. His big mouth moved towards Phoebe's neck from behind. His fiery tongue licked and kissed Phoebe's white and blushing neck. "Oh, you big pervert." Phoebe, who was fast asleep, also clearly felt the strong stimulation. She couldn't help but moan. One of her hands subconsciously covered the hand that Han Shuo was wantonly invading her breasts. She brought Han Shuo's hand and took the initiative to wander around her own chest. On the other side, Phoebe's buttocks clearly felt the high contact. She couldn't help but clamp her slender legs together, as if she wanted to feel Han Shuo's invasion more clearly. This kind of ecstatic stimulation made Han Shuo gasp uncontrollably, and his kissing and licking of Phoebe became more intense. Just as the feeling of ecstasy was getting stronger and stronger, Phoebe suddenly twisted her neck and turned around to face Han Shuo. She opened her sleepy eyes and looked at Han Shuo, who had a look of enjoyment on his face. Chapter 171. Han Shuo was dumbfounded on the spot. His heart thumped wildly. He opened his mouth wide and didn't know what to do. No matter what, breaking into someone's boudoir in the middle of the night, climbing into someone's bed, and doing such an outrageous thing was unexplainable and unforgivable. The sleepy Phoebe stared at him in a daze. Han Shuo had already prepared himself for the onslaught of a violent storm. To Han Shuo's surprise, just when he didn't know what to do, Phoebe turned around and twisted her body to face Han Shuo. Then, she wrapped her snake-like arms around Han Shuo's neck. Her red lips moved towards Han Shuo's wide-open mouth. Her small, fragrant tongue, mixed with her smooth saliva, took the initiative to extend into Han Shuo's big mouth. When she faced Han Shuo like this, Phoebe's two long, slender legs also slid between Han Shuo's thighs, while her other warm, firm, beautiful leg rested on Han Shuo's thick waist. Her body started twisting like a snake. When Phoebe slept, she wore a thin, silky underwear. When the two of them were so close, this silky underwear was so close to their skin that it was almost useless. A perfect naked body was entangled in his body, and her fragrant tongue even took the initiative to let him taste it. Han Shuo forgot the panic just now and reacted enthusiastically. Two big hands put on Phoebe's upper chest and plump buttocks, rubbing them unceremoniously. He felt the smooth roundness. As his hands kept rubbing, Han Shuo's breathing became more and more intense. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore and directly pressed Phoebe under his body. He tore apart Phoebe's thin underwear violently, and his big hands fell directly on Phoebe's bare full chest. Ugh, it hurts. Phoebe cried out in pain and withdrew her tongue from Han Shuo's passionate entanglement. Her almond-shaped eyes gradually became a bit clearer. Han Shuo was stunned and couldn't help but pant heavily. Sorry, I'll be gentler next. When these words left his mouth, Phoebe, who had been a bit confused, immediately blushed. She abruptly pushed Han Shuo away with exceptional fear and hurriedly pulled over the thin blanket to cover herself. She screamed, "You can talk, this isn't a dream." Han Shuo finally reacted when Phoebe said this. It looked like Phoebe had taken the initiative to kiss him just now because she hadn't completely woken up yet. She thought she was still in a dream. Under muddle-headed circumstances, the entanglement of their bodies, Han Shuo's slightly rough movements, and his response finally caused Phoebe to instantly wake up. She also recognized the true situation, which was why she was so shocked. "Miss Phoebe, what's the matter?" Phoebe's shrill call attracted the attention of the 3 Griffin Legion guards patrolling outside. One of them stood in front of the door and asked, "No, nothing, just a nightmare. Don't worry about me, you guys just keep watch outside." After a moment of silence, Han Shuo hardened his heart and decided that he might as well go all the way. He might as well force himself on her. Han Shuo, who was passively enduring Phoebe's hammering, suddenly grabbed Phoebe's small hand in a domineering manner. His other hand suddenly reached out and lifted the thin blanket that was wrapped around Phoebe and directly pressed down on Phoebe. A frantic kiss suddenly fell on Phoebe, fiercely licking and kissing her neck, cheeks, shoulders, and soft breasts. When Han Shuo was doing this, his heavy body pressed down on Phoebe, and his strong arms held her so that she couldn't move at all. She could only open her mouth and call out, let go of me, you bastard. Ugh, don't lick there. Shut up, you bastard scoundrel. Oh, don't." Curses and struggles continuously escaped from Phoebe's fragrant lips. However, because there were guards outside, Phoebe obviously didn't dare disturb them. She forcefully suppressed her cries and didn't have any effect on Han Shuo at all. Under Han Shuo's forceful kiss, Phoebe's soft cries became more and more urgent. Her cheeks became redder and redder, and her struggles became weaker and weaker. In the end, it turned into a low moan. Han Shuo suddenly had a carefree feeling and frantically licked and kissed Phoebe. "Oh, why did you bite me?" Suddenly, an enormous pain shot out from Han Shuo's mouth. She'd only been able to move her mouth, but when she saw that she couldn't struggle, she lifted her neck and bit down on Han Shuo's ear with her pearly white teeth. "If you bite me, I'll bite you back." After biting Han Shuo, Phoebe's face was filled with a strange color. Her eyes were even brighter, and seemed to contain a suppressed sweetness. Then, let's bite together. Han Shuo laughed lewdly. His mouth, which had been kissing Phoebe's neck and shoulder, suddenly moved towards Phoebe's cherry lips. Contrary to Han Shuo's expectations, Phoebe didn't struggle at all this time. Instead, she panted and welcomed him passionately. Her slippery little tongue took the initiative to enter Han Shuo's mouth and entangled with Han Shuo intensely. As soon as he sensed Phoebe's response, Han Shuo's heart fluttered, and his hands and feet started to become restless again. His large hands caressed Phoebe's plump and firm breasts, unrestrainedly rubbing them. His high-spirited lower body even more naughtily moved around Phoebe's body. With a soft "oh," Phoebe panted heavily and used all her strength to push Han Shuo away. She didn't dare to look at Han Shuo and said shyly, "All right, it's almost daybreak." Looking out the window, it was indeed daybreak. There were faint voices coming from outside. Thinking of Phoebe's safety, Han Shuo suppressed his desire and moved away from Phoebe's body. He gently covered Phoebe's perfect body with a thin blanket and then held her in his arms. When Han Shuo did this, a strong woman like Phoebe's eyes lit up. She seemed to be enjoying it very much. After Han Shuo finished doing all this, she lowered her head and said softly, "You violated me again today. What do you think I should do?" With a smirk, Han Shuo hugged Phoebe's body tightly and said domineeringly, "From now on, you are my woman." As soon as these words left her mouth, Phoebe's flushed cheeks shone with a strange luster. It was as if she had been waiting for this day, waiting for Han Shuo to say these words for a long time. Then, when the truth was right in front of her eyes, she appeared shy and unwilling. However, the sweetness on her face showed her joy. Her face lowered to her neck. Phoebe was very shy and obediently said in a mosquito-like voice, "N." "I've already gathered all of them for you," while helping Bob Asher transport these items. A list was handed over and Han Shuo took a look. He discovered that these materials had all been prepared by Phoebe, according to Han Shuo's requests, in order to refine the Een demons that were a level higher than the original demons. It looked like Phoebe was very attentive to his matters. In such a short period of time, she had actually gathered enough materials to refine the Een demons for him. Pulling Phoebe over and kissing Phoebe's rosy cheeks, Han Shuo said happily to Phoebe, "Hehe, thank you so much." The guard's voice sounded again at this time. "Miss Phoebe, the sky is already bright. You should get up and leave." "Yes, I'm fully awake and will be out soon." Phoebe responded loudly and pushed Han Shuo away. She shyly put on her clothes under the thin blankets and rebuked, "It's all your fault. You tore my undergarments, you savage scoundrel." Chuckling mischievously, Han Shuo left Phoebe's bedside and said, all right, I'll make it up to you. Remember what I said, I'll be leaving for now, but you'll find you soon enough." Han Shuo's body slowly retreated outside after he finished speaking. Just as Han Shuo reached the window behind him, Phoebe suddenly called out softly. When Han Shuo turned around and looked at her in surprise, Phoebe warned softly, "Be careful." "I will." Han Shuo responded confidently and took advantage of the guard's blink to shoot out of the window like a ghost. Han Shuo concealed himself and flew towards the Dark Mantle stronghold early in the morning. When he returned to the Dark Mantle stronghold, Han Shuo discovered that Chester was already there. It looked like he'd returned from Elaine's hotel. "What's the situation?" Han Shuo immediately asked when he saw Chester. "I fainted in the hotel. When I woke up, a great druid said that we'd been drugged and didn't say anything else." Chester was a bit confused as he explained to Han Shuo. He briefly explained what had happened after Chester had fainted, and then asked Chester again, "Did that great druid chat with the female captain of the mercenary band? Has Lisa been safely sent back? What's the current situation in the hotel?" "It seems that the great druid and the female mage swordsman called Candace talked about something, but they avoided us, so I don't know what they talked about. I personally handed Lisa over to Lawrence, and he said he'll contact you soon. Master Elaine has arranged for Belinda's room to be redecorated, and it should be back to normal soon. The great druids inside, as well as the mercenary band, are still there and haven't left." Chester responded, "So that's how it is. Oh, right. Did you see Emily after you returned? No. I only saw two of Madame Emily's people in charge of guarding the Dark Mantle stronghold. Madame Emily isn't here at the moment. Chester responded. Oh, I see. There's nothing else for me to do for now. If you're free, why don't you go out and scout out the current situation in the city? Han Shuo smiled and walked past Chester towards the secret room. After setting up the transportation matrix here, Han Shuo once again entered the cemetery of death. The little lewd dragon Gilbert immediately ran over excitedly when he saw Han Shuo appear, thinking that Han Shuo was going to take him out. Now's not the time, but I'll take you out of the cemetery of death in the next few days. Don't worry. When he saw Gilbert rush over with a face full of excitement, Han Shuo immediately poured cold water on him. Afterwards, ignoring Gilbert's protests, Han Shuo arrived at the original demon cave where he'd refined the original demons last time. The refinement of the Een demons was more or less the same as that of the original demons. Apart from making some changes to the matrix, replacing it with even more precious materials, and adding 3 drops of blood essence, there weren't any special changes in other aspects. Taking a deep breath, Han Shuo quickly went through some of the details he needed to pay attention to in his mind. He then took out the Demon's Lair Edge and used his mind to control the Demon's Lair Edge. He began to change the layout of the original Demon Cave, transforming it into the shape of the Een Demon Cave. Finally, after the Een Demon Cave had taken shape, Han Shuo placed the materials that he'd entrusted Phoebe to gather into the Een Demon Cave according to the sequence of the Matrix. When refining the original demons, only 18 wraiths were needed as a catalyst. However, the number of Een demons had doubled, rising to 36 wraiths. However, the refining time had been shortened to 18 days. This was because Han Shuo's demonic arts had reached the true demon realm, and he had the existence of blood essence, in addition to the leap in quality of his magical yuan. He had to make the 36 wraiths fight each other within a short 18 days, and finally snatch 3 drops of Han Shuo's blood essence. Only the strongest wraiths would have the right to absorb the energy within the Een Demon Cave, and be refined into Een demons that were even more powerful than the original demons. After the 3 Een demons were formed, not only would they possess all the effects of the original demons, but their own life force would also be strengthened. They would be able to infiltrate a person's body and remain hidden until the critical moment to deliver a fatal blow. For example, if a person was possessed by an Een demon, then everything that the person saw and felt would be roughly sensed by Han Shuo through the Een demons. The Een demon hidden within the person's body could suddenly act up when the person was in danger, asleep, or in a fight with someone, catching them off guard and attacking the person's body. It would be best if the enemy could be killed. Otherwise, as long as the opponent wasn't particularly strong, the Een demon could even continue to hide within the person's body, or leave the person's body and escape back to its host, Han Shuo's body. After the other 3 Een demons were formed, they could also temporarily change into Han Shuo's appearance under the will of the original body, forming an illusion that was identical to Han Shuo. If Han Shuo were to fight at this time, this technique of suddenly forming 3 illusions would often have the effect of confusing and catching the opponent off guard. It could even turn the tide of the battle. When Han Shuo dripped his blood essence and discovered that the 36 wraiths were madly fighting within the Een Demon Cave, fighting for the 3 drops of Han Shuo's blood essence, Han Shuo discovered that the Een Demon Cave had already been successfully activated. He didn't continue to stay here and left, ignoring Gilbert's complaints. Chapter 173. After returning from the Cemetery of Death, Han Shuo immediately discovered Emily standing beside the transportation matrix as soon as he appeared in the secret room. "Have you seen your little lover?" Emily immediately asked when she saw Han Shuo. "Phoebe doesn't know anything about the siege equipment that Bob Asher requested. I've also told her that she will cooperate fully with us. I think we can cover up the matter that implicated Phoebe this time." Han Shuo put away the 6 magic wands one by one as he walked out of the transportation matrix and explained to Emily, "If Phoebe really doesn't know anything, then this matter won't implicate her. Our Dark Mantle will never wrongly accuse an innocent person. You'll know this in the future." Emily said seriously, then giggled and said, "You ran into her room in the middle of the night. Did she think you were a thief who stole a perfume and beat you up? Of course not. Han Shuo responded with a natural expression. Emily looked at Han Shuo a few times, trying to glean something from his expression, but discovered that Han Shuo's expression was calm and didn't change at all. All right, that's it for now. I've just received news that Belinda, who you let go, is contacting you through your method. I don't know what she wants. Emily discovered that she couldn't glean anything from Han Shuo's expression, so she didn't say anything else and went straight to business. Han Shuo had left behind a method for Belinda to contact him before she left. Han Shuo had also told this method to Emily so that Emily could keep an eye out for him. Now that he heard her say this, he immediately said, "All right, then let's go see Belinda and see what she wants from me." Han Shuo and Emily walked side by side in the desolate forest where Han Shuo had killed 2 members of the Griffin Legion. Although he'd already left a backup plan on Belinda's body, Han Shuo was still quite cautious. He was extremely focused when he walked over, deathly afraid that he'd fall into Belinda's trap. When Han Shuo entered the forest, he suddenly sensed an enormous presence hidden within. This energy obviously didn't come from Belinda. Han Shuo immediately focused his consciousness and said softly to Emily, "Be careful, there's something unusual in there." Nodding, Emily said, "Yes, it looks like Belinda isn't the only one inside. We should be careful in case Belinda ambushes us." "Don't worry, if Belinda really dares to act against us, I'll make sure she's in for it." Han Shuo's expression was calm as he took out the Demon's Lair edge from his space ring and walked into the depths of the forest. Suddenly, a dazzling bolt of lightning shot out from the depths of the dense forest like a dragon swimming in the void. This bolt of lightning was as thick as an arm as it snaked through the air and exploded with dazzling light. The trees on the side creaked as it made its way over, giving rise to thick smoke. Frowning, the Demon's Lair edge shot out according to Han Shuo's will, leaping over several trees in its way and stabbing towards the incoming bolt of lightning. A series of crackling sounds rang out as Han Shuo's Demon's Lair edge sensed the surging fighting aura. This kind of fighting aura was mixed with the power of thunder and lightning, appearing extremely violent and ferocious. Even though Han Shuo had infused the Demon's Lair edge with magical yuan, it still couldn't withstand it for long. Han Shuo felt that something was amiss in that moment of contact and hurriedly directed the Demon's Lair edge to fly back into his palm. "Who's there?" Emily was also very cautious at this moment. She held her magic staff and stared at the bolt of lightning in the air as she shouted in her delicate voice, "Thunder Magus Swordsman Johnny of the Calamity Church, I just want to see if you have the right to cooperate with us." A low voice suddenly sounded from the depths of the forest. A middle-aged man in black armor with silver curly hair walked out from the depths of the forest with Belinda after the voice sounded. This middle-aged man had an ugly, slanted scar from his left eye to his nose, making his already ugly face look even more ferocious. The moment he appeared from the dense forest, his voice had just sounded when his body swiftly flew to the area where the lightning was swimming in the empty space. He extended his hairy right hand, and a milky white dough chi instantly flashed. The lightning that was swimming in the empty space seemed to be pulled by a great force and landed in his palm. When the power of thunder and lightning receded, Han Shuo discovered that it was a slender silver longsword. However, the power of thunder and lightning still lingered on the hilt, flashing from time to time. The milky white fighting aura meant that this person had the strength of a swordmaster or earth knight. With this kind of strength and lightning magic, it was no wonder that this person was so strong. Even Han Shuo's Demon's Lair edge couldn't gain the upper hand against him. The veiled Belinda slowly walked out from behind the Thunder Magus Swordsman Johnny. She first apologized when she arrived in front of Han Shuo and then said to Johnny, "Uncle Johnny, I've already told you that their strength is enough to cooperate with us. Otherwise, how would I have failed?" Although this person from the Calamity Church called Johnny seemed to be an arrogant person, he still seemed to respect Belinda. He couldn't help but nod when he heard her say this. Their strength is passable, but what help can they provide us if we cooperate with them? Bob Asher of the Griffin Legion is a Sky Knight. With his strength, these two won't be able to deal with him at all. Only by using your golem to block the others, and I'll have the chance to kill him. Emily couldn't help but say when she saw that this person was so arrogant. Apart from Bob Asher being a Sky Knight in the Griffin Legion, there are 5 Earth Knights who follow him all year round. Add to that Clark's Master, Great Swordmaster Gabriel, and 2 Archmages of the Earth and Water elements. Just based on this strength alone, it'll be a fool's dream if anyone wants to kill him alone unless a Sacred Swordmaster, Sacred Magus, or a Sacred Knight personally makes a move. Heh. Although Mr. Johnny is a Thunder Mega Swordsman, it won't be easy for you to defeat Bob Asher himself in a real battle, not to mention his followers. Most people would know about Bob Asher's followers, but they couldn't be like the Dark Mantle, knowing so much about every expert by Bob Asher's side. When Emily described Bob Asher's followers in such detail, even the arrogant Thunder Mega Swordsman Johnny's expression changed greatly, and he appeared a bit shocked. Then, what help can you give us? Johnny asked Emily after a moment of silence with a stoic face. No matter what goals you have against Bob Asher, I only want to tell you not to act rashly. Otherwise, it won't just be you, but even we will be dragged into this mess. If we work together, I can provide you with detailed information on the people around Bob Asher. This will help you find out where he usually goes and even help you send his followers away in a short amount of time, creating a suitable opportunity for you to assassinate him. Emily revealed a confident smile as she slowly described the things that the Dark Mantle could do for Johnny. Uncle Johnny, this is exactly what we need. Belinda suddenly spoke up at this moment. I think you're from the Lancelot Empire? Johnny wasn't an idiot and naturally guessed the identities of Han Shua and Emily. Nodding, Emily admitted frankly, that's right. I hope that you'll keep this a secret for us if we work together. Humph. You people are the most hypocritical. You'll work with us when you need us, but you'll turn your back on us when things are over and use all your power to attack our church. Johnny mocked with extreme disdain when he heard Emily's words. Since that's the case, then this matter is settled. We'll find a suitable opportunity to assassinate Bob Asher in the next 2 days and let you know when we've made the arrangements. You can also take the opportunity to find more reinforcements. Otherwise, it's not very realistic to kill Bob Asher. One could tell from Johnny's expression that although he didn't like serving the country, he seemed to be used to making use of each other. That was why Han Shua had said this. Judging from the Calamity Church's current display of strength, it wasn't very likely that they would be able to assassinate Bob Asher. Han Shua and Emily had agreed to work with them not because they hoped to kill Bob Asher, but because they hoped to obtain the information they needed from Bob Asher's manor during the chaos and then use the Dark Mantle's abilities to take him down. All right, then this matter is settled. I hope that you two don't try any tricks, or you'll regret it. Johnny finally agreed with a darkened face. Chapter 174. After leaving the dense forest, Han Shua and Emily split up, heading to Lawrence's new residence alone. When Han Shua arrived and saw Lawrence, he heard Lawrence thank him. Thank you so much for last time. Otherwise, Lisa might have been in danger. You're welcome. With my relationship with Lisa, these are things that I should do. Right? How is Lisa now? Han Shua asked Lawrence with a smile after sitting down. Don't worry, I've already sent someone to send her back to Austin City. As strong as the Griffin Legion is, they wouldn't dare act wildly in the capital. That's great, right? Your junior sister Phoebe is also in Valence City right now. She has some dealings with the Griffin Legion. Han Shua started talking about Phoebe after thinking for a moment. Surprise appeared on his face. Lawrence was quite surprised and asked Han Shua in confusion. Why is she in Valence City? What's going on? Because of his previous understanding, Han Shua discovered that Lawrence and Phoebe had a good relationship. As the third prince, it would be safer for him to know what Phoebe had done first. Therefore, after Lawrence asked, Han Shua roughly explained what had happened. When Han Shua finished speaking, Lawrence furrowed his brow and was silent for a while. He looked deeply at Han Shua and said, "It looks like the matter of Phoebe this time is all thanks to you. Your Dark Mantle is truly resourceful." Han Shua started when he heard these words and focused his eyes on Lawrence. After looking deeply at him for a while, Han Shua exhaled lightly and said to Lawrence, "When did you learn of my identity?" "Since the last time we left the slave trading house." Lawrence responded with a slight smile and hesitated before saying, "To be precise, I only learned of your identity now. After leaving the slave trading house last time, I began to suspect Madame Emily's background. I only understood Madame Emily's identity after I found someone to confirm it in detail, and then began to suspect you. There was nothing dishonorable about working for the Dark Mantle. The existence of the Dark Mantle wasn't a secret amongst the senior executives of the Empire. Their duties and actions wouldn't harm the interests of ordinary people unless they did something harmful to the Empire. Otherwise, the existence of the Dark Mantle would even protect ordinary people." Han Shuo didn't feel that there was anything wrong with this. Musing for a moment, Han Shuo's expression was the same as usual as he smiled. "Not bad. I've just joined the Dark Mantle not long ago, but I do deeply understand how resourceful the Dark Mantle is." "Then, you should know me quite well by now?" Lawrence suddenly looked at Han Shuo with a faint smile on his face. Starting, Han Shuo laughed heartily. "Of course, you're the son of the finance minister, Lawrence. Everyone knows this." Even though Han Shuo was well aware of the third prince's identity, he couldn't say it out loud. Otherwise, his relationship with Lawrence would likely change. At the very least, Lawrence would probe Han Shuo's thoughts and perhaps invite Han Shuo to work for him. This was a difficult problem that Han Shuo wasn't willing to face at the moment, so playing dumb was the wisest course of action. An odd smile appeared on Lawrence's face when he heard Han Shuo's words. He looked deeply at Han Shuo for a while before responding, "All right, let's not talk about this for now. Your Dark Mantle must have come to Valence City this time because you understand that Bob Asher has intentions of rebelling. That's why you've come to gather evidence. My goal in coming here can be said to be the same as yours, to bring down this Griffin Legion commander. Can you tell me how your progress is right now?" Han Shuo was a bit hesitant when he heard Lawrence's question. He quickly weighed the pros and cons in his mind before saying that he wanted to obtain evidence of the siege equipment and hand it over to the senior executives of the Dark Mantle so that they could officially arrest Bob Asher. However, Han Shuo didn't say a word about the matter of allying with the Calamity Church. He didn't want Lawrence to know about this. "Since our goals are the same, then I think we can work together. What plans do you have? How can I help you?" Lawrence asked Han Shuo. Han Shuo couldn't help but sweep his eyes over Lawrence when he heard these words. He asked, "Then what can you help us with?" Smiling slightly mysteriously, Lawrence looked deeply at Han Shuo and said, "I have someone in the Griffin Legion. This person's position is second only to Bob Asher. This person can directly mobilize the Griffin Legion at certain times and do many things for us." Han Shuo's mind spun furiously as he learned a lot of useful information from Lawrence's words. It looked like Lawrence's trip to Valence City this time wasn't as simple as dealing with Bob Asher. It was likely that he'd topple Asher and support his own people to take over the Griffin Legion. This was all in preparation for his future fight for the throne. That would be best. I need to make some plans. There will be a move in the next 2 days. I'll let you know when the time comes and discuss with you how to cooperate. Han Shuo thought for a moment and said to Lawrence, "No problem. I'll wait for your good news." "Heh, we can be considered friends now. I'm quite confident in your way of doing things. I know that you're cautious enough and that there shouldn't be any major slip-ups after you've carefully thought through your preparations. Let me know when you've settled everything, and I'll do my best to cooperate with you. We'll be mutually beneficial." Lawrence laughed heartily and said straightforwardly, "All right then. I'll take my leave now." Han Shuo said his goodbyes and left Lawrence's new residence, heading for Elaine's hotel not too far away. When Han Shuo arrived at the hotel, he discovered that the damaged room that Belinda had been staying in had been more or less repaired. It looked like it would be ready to be used again in a short period of time. Han Shuo and Emily's room hadn't been checked out yet. Therefore, Han Shuo returned to the room after arriving at the hotel. The fat middle-aged woman, Elaine, walked in after a short while. She closed the door and said with a smile, "I have to thank you for your help. Otherwise, my hotel would have been destroyed by that Calamity Church woman." "It looks like Emily has already told you everything that happened," Han Shuo said. Nodding, the owner of the hotel called Elaine said, "Yes, Madame Emily came by once and told me everything that had happened. She also told me to keep an eye on the guests here. What other instructions do you have for me this time? Have the guests in the hotel left yet? Has the female mage swordsman from the mercenary band made contact with anyone else? Han Shuo thought of his agreement with Phoebe and couldn't help but ask. There haven't been any changes to the guests here. The great druid and that little female elf are still temporarily staying in the hotel. The two went out during the day and returned not long ago. Apart from the woman called Candace, the others from the mercenary band have all gone out for a while. They seem to be searching for new missions and haven't returned yet. I've observed and haven't seen anyone suspicious enter Candace's room, nor have I seen her leave. Apart from that, there's nothing out of the ordinary in the hotel. The Griffin Legion sent someone to inspect once and asked about the collapse of the building, but I brushed it off. Elaine didn't seem to affect her at all when she saw what had happened in the hotel. Her expression was relaxed as she slowly narrated what had happened to Han Shuo in great detail. The Griffin Legion won't be suspicious of this place, will they? Han Shuo asked with furrowed brow after a moment's thought. Don't worry, I think there shouldn't be any problems. I've been in Valen City for many years, and I've already made arrangements with the Griffin Legion a long time ago. Elaine assured Han Shuo with great confidence. Han Shuo couldn't say anything else after her words, otherwise it would appear that he didn't trust her. Nodding, Han Shuo said, "You've worked hard." He then motioned for Elaine to go about her own business. After Elaine left, Han Shuo thought for a moment and decided to tell her that Phoebe might be coming to find Candace, in case she suddenly left the hotel. As he walked out of his room, Han Shuo pondered on how to break the news to Candace as he walked towards her room. He suddenly heard "Big Bad Guy" on the way, and then saw the little elf Angelica pointing excitedly at him from the window of Caspian's room. Chapter 175. You think you can trick me? I don't believe it. Angelica was quite disdainful as she pouted and wrinkled her delicate nose. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. All right, I still have things to do. Go do what you need to do. Saying this with a smile, Han Shuo didn't pay any attention to Angelica and planned on going to Candace's room. At this moment, the door creaked open from the room that Angelica had run out from. The great druid Caspian walked out and only glanced at Han Shuo before exclaiming in surprise, "How can it be you?" Nodding at Caspian in a friendly manner with a smile, Han Shuo bowed. "Greetings, great druid elder Caspian. I met you last time in the dark forest with Trunks." You know my grandfather as well? Angelica was quite surprised to see Han Shuo greet Caspian. She looked at her grandfather, and then looked at Han Shuo. Han Shuo smiled and was about to respond when Caspian's eyes lit up. He looked over Han Shuo's body, and a thoughtful smile suddenly appeared on his face. "So it's you. But we should have met recently, heh?" Although Han Shuo had been wearing a black hood not too long ago, his physique and voice hadn't been concealed. In addition, Han Shuo had called out Caspian's name when things had concluded. Based on these three flaws, it wasn't strange that Caspian would quickly recognize Han Shuo when he saw Han Shuo again. Han Shuo didn't argue or explain anything with regards to Caspian's words. He flashed a meaningful smile at Caspian and said, "I have some matters to attend to, goodbye. Little Angelica, don't disturb other people's business. Hurry and come back to the room with me." Caspian nodded knowingly and grabbed the little elf, planning on leaving with Angelica. Candace, who'd heard Han Shuo's words, just happened to open the door at this moment. She looked at Han Shuo and then at Caspian, who was talking to Han Shuo, with surprise. She nodded at the two in a friendly manner and finally said to Han Shuo, "You've come to find me?" "Sister Candace, I've come to look for you as well. Let me go in as well." Angelica called out sweetly to Candace, "If our cute little elf really has something to do, then I'll come find you later. But I have some matters to attend to right now." Candace laughed lightly and opened the door. She leaned to the side and said to Han Shuo, "Come in." "All right, stop messing around. Come back to my room and continue practicing magic." The druid Caspian glared at Angelica reproachfully and pulled her back. Candace closed the door tightly after Han Shuo entered Candace's room. She then seemed to think of something and suddenly looked at Han Shuo. "You were the one who saved us last night?" Han Shuo didn't need to deny anything about this and nodded. This matter is a bit complicated. Has Belinda, who hired you, paid your commission? Shaking her head with a wry smile, Candace said, "She's from the Calamity Church. This church has always done things in an evil and sinister manner. I'm already very lucky that nothing happened to me. How could I have received a commission? Promise me one thing. Don't try to make trouble for Belinda. You won't get anything out of this. As for the commission she paid you this time, I'll help you get it back." Han Shuo thought for a moment and stared at Candace. Candace was a bit taken aback when she heard these words and looked at Han Shuo in confusion. "I heard from Caspian that you and a woman took Belinda away. Just who are you? Since you've captured Belinda, why would you say that?" "This matter is a bit complicated. I'll explain it to you when Phoebe gets here. But don't think about doing anything to Belinda, because I know the strength she holds. She's not someone that your Battlefire mercenary band can handle." Although Han Shuo hadn't known Candace for long, he knew that she wasn't the type to give up easily. He also understood that even if she knew that her life was in danger, she would still do it if she set her mind on something. This was why he was trying to persuade her. Why is Phoebe here as well?" Candace first cried out in surprise, and then said to Han Shuo with a resolute expression, "You're a bit too late. I've already arranged for the others to search for Belinda's tracks. The Mercenary Association should bear our losses now that something has happened to our employer. I'll deal with Belinda myself. I'm begging you, sister. Let Belinda go for now. This woman is in my hands right now, and I need her to do some things. Can you give me some face?" For a woman as unreasonable as Candace, the more he told her that there was great danger, the more stubborn she would become. With no other choice, Han Shuo could only use this method to convince her. Candace was no longer so insistent after hearing Han Shuo's words. Her bright, resolute eyes stared at Han Shuo for a while before she nodded reluctantly. "Since you're begging me so, then all right. I promise you that I won't pursue this matter any further. However, Belinda must give us the commission she's due. Otherwise, I won't be able to answer to the captain." No problem at all. I'll have Belinda pay up in the next 2 days after I've interrogated her." Han Shuo hastened to agree when he saw that Candace had loosened up. As Han Shuo and Candace spoke, the sound of their footsteps approached from the outside. Han Shuo then heard the owner of the hotel, Elaine's voice. "This room is where Miss Candace lives." "Thank you very much." Phoebe's cold, proud voice sounded from outside at this moment. A look of pleasant surprise appeared on Candace's face as she shot to her feet, quickly walking to open the door. When the door opened, Phoebe, dressed in an elegant dress, had a noble, aloof expression on her face. However, the coldness on her face faded as soon as she saw Candace. But now, Han Shua's head was swelling as he racked his brain over how to handle the relationship between the two. It's impossible for me to like a rude and disrespectful fellow like him. Besides, I'm already married, so it's even more impossible. Don't let your imagination run wild." Emily sighed lightly in her heart, but still wore a smile on her face as she comforted Phoebe. "I'd long since noticed that this fellow was always secretive. So he's from the Empire's Dark Mantle. We should have guessed long ago." Candace looked at Han Shuo with interest and said with a light smile. Contrary to Han Shuo's expectations, both Phoebe and Candace didn't seem surprised at all after his identity had been exposed by Emily. It was as if Han Shuo's actions had long since been taken for granted by them that he was from a secret organization. Emily's revelation seemed to only help them confirm the suspicions in their hearts. "That's what I said. He's always been secretive. As a student of the necromancy major, he often does strange things. So he has another identity as a member of the Dark Mantle. This completely explains his strange actions in the past." Phoebe chuckled lightly and rolled her eyes at Han Shuo from afar on Emily's side, as if blaming Han Shuo for keeping secrets from her. Shrugging, Han Shuo said, "All right, I think now isn't the time to talk about these things. How to help Phoebe extricate herself from this matter and take down Griffin Legion Chief Bob Asher should be our top priority right now." The two girls finally stopped discussing Han Shuo's identity after hearing Han Shua's words. Because Emily didn't know how much Han Shua had told the two girls, it was still Han Shua who explained things to the two girls this time. My senior brother Lawrence is also in Valen City? Phoebe was a bit surprised when Han Shua mentioned Lawrence's existence and exclaimed softly. Nodding, Han Shua said, "That's right. Lawrence will also help us in this matter. He originally came to Valen City because of his cousin Lisa's family. What happened to Lisa's family was completely caused by the chief of the Griffin Legion. Lawrence wants to take revenge for Lisa's family, so he will do his best to help us." Han Shua had understood Lawrence's purpose in coming after their last conversation. It wasn't just to save Lisa, but to eliminate the chief of the Griffin Legion and support his own people in the position of chief. However, Han Shua couldn't say much to the two girls due to Lawrence's identity, so he could only say that he was only willing to help because of Lisa. "I've already done as you requested and secretly dripped a drop of blood onto one of the siege weapons. We were escorted all the way to a place in the west of the city before being taken away by the soldiers of the Griffin Legion. I think that the Griffin Legion's weapons storehouse must be there. We can look there." Phoebe narrated her actions after leaving Han Shua after Han Shua had finished speaking. "Very good. The Griffin Legion's weapons storehouse is indeed there. I'll be able to ascertain the direction after making a trip there. As long as we obtain the records of the Griffin Legion's purchase of this batch of siege weapons and report it to our superiors, we'll be able to catch Bob Asher red-handed for the crime of treason." Han Shua was overjoyed when he heard Phoebe's words. Han Shua and the three girls discussed for a while after he'd spoken. They used a mission as an excuse to leave with Emily. Candace frowned when Han Shua and Emily had just walked out of the room. "I keep feeling that his relationship with Madame Emily isn't quite right. The tone of their conversation seems a bit too intimate." "Heh, don't overthink things. Madame Emily is a widow and a member of the Betteridge family. Nothing will happen to her." Phoebe had a blissful smile on her face as she comforted Candace. "Oh right, you two haven't really put on an act, have you? Otherwise, you wouldn't have such an expression." Candace suddenly exclaimed softly in surprise when she saw Phoebe's expression of a little girl immersed in love and happiness. Phoebe's face became even redder when she heard Candace's question. She said bashfully, Last night we already. My gosh, Phoebe, you're too open. You slept with him so quickly?" Candace's red lips parted, and she couldn't help but cry out before Phoebe had finished speaking. "Pa, what nonsense are you spouting? We only confirmed our relationship last night." Phoebe's face was flushed red with embarrassment as she cursed Candace lowly and hurriedly defended herself. "I think it's not just confirmed our relationship. There's something else you're hiding from your expression. Hurry up and tell me the truth." Candace watched Phoebe attentively and immediately closed in on Phoebe with a face full of gossip after she'd finished speaking, viciously demanding that Phoebe explain everything. Han Shua and Emily didn't immediately go on their mission after leaving Candace's room, but instead walked towards Emily's room together with tacit understanding. After the two entered the room and closed the door, Han Shua casually pulled Emily into his arms and asked softly, "Why? I only need to know that you have me in your heart. That's enough. I'm much older than you, and I also have the status of the Betteridge family's daughter-in-law. If you try to expose our relationship, it will have a great impact on both you and me." Emily snuggled into Han Shua's arms and sighed softly, speaking of her difficulties. Before Han Shua's strength was strong enough, it would indeed have a great impact if their relationship was exposed, especially to Emily. This was especially true for Emily. Not only would it affect her brother's career, it would also be an ugly blow to the Betteridge family. Therefore, Emily could only lament and feel sorry for herself, but there was nothing she could do. Phoebe is a good girl. Although her birth isn't noble, at least she's clean and has no fetters. You should be with her. Her business will also help your career in the future. I can completely understand you." Emily buried her head in Han Shua's chest and murmured softly, "I promise you, our sneaky days will only be temporary. There will be a day when no one in the entire empire will dare to interfere in my affairs. I will give you what you deserve." Han Shua promised with a resolute expression. He kissed Emily's body fiercely and carried her to the bedroom. Emily responded to Han Shuo with an unprecedented passion, perhaps wanting to make up for the hidden bitterness she felt this time through intense pleasure. Chapter 177. Han Shuo left on his own after a bout of lovemaking with Emily, heading for the Griffin Legion's weapons warehouse in the west of the city. Through the eyes and ears of the Dark Mantle, Han Shuo had a rough idea of the location of the weapons warehouse. There was no trace of Han Shuo when he moved in the night. After using the art of the demonic ninth heavens to sneak into the weapons warehouse, Han Shuo hid himself in a remote corner and calmly activated his magical yuan, using the demon infant to sense the location of the drop of blood essence. Han Shuo felt the demon infant pulse as he did so, and with a single thought, he sensed the exact location of the drop of blood essence. After avoiding the patrolling Griffin Legion soldiers, Han Shuo stopped not far from a low building. Using his bright eyes, Han Shuo discovered that the building was heavily guarded. Apart from the heavily guarded front door, the windowless room was completely sealed off. After observing for a while, Han Shuo calmed his mind and sensed for a bit. He could clearly feel that the drop of blood essence was actually under the house. This meant that there must be a secret chamber in the basement of the house that was specifically used to store items. It was a pity that the Earth Elite Zombie hadn't been born yet. Otherwise, the Earth Elite Zombie would be able to burrow into the ground and explore with the power of the Earth element. Without the Earth Elite Zombie, Han Shuo would have to take care of all the guards at the door if he wanted to go in and see what was going on. Although the guards weren't weak, Han Shuo was still confident that he could take care of them without anyone noticing. However, doing so would definitely alert the enemy, and perhaps the siege equipment would be moved away again. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Han Shuo didn't act rashly and instead retreated back the way he'd come. Within the Dark Mantle stronghold, Han Shuo and Emily met up. They took into account the various factions in Valent City, including Lawrence of the Calamity Church, and carefully assessed Bob Asher's strength. The two furrowed their brows as they began to think of a strategy to deal with Bob Asher. Han Shuo learned from the Dark Mantle that there was a secret room hidden within Bob Asher's mansion. The two of them discussed for a while, and were certain that the records of Bob Asher's purchase of siege equipment would be hidden in that secret room. There might also be some other incriminating evidence. After some discussion, they finally decided to sneak into Bob Asher's mansion when he held Clark's funeral the next night. They would make use of the important person in Lawrence's grasp to make the defenses even more lax. They would move away a portion of the people around Bob Asher and use the Calamity Church to assassinate Bob Asher. Han Shuo and Emily would take the opportunity to go to the secret room and see if they could find any useful information. After the general action agenda was decided, Han Shuo and Emily carefully considered some of the problems that they might encounter and came up with countermeasures over and over again. When the two of them felt that it was about time, Han Shuo finally made his move. He went to see Belinda and Lawrence of the Calamity Church and carefully discussed the plan with both sides. Although this matter had something to do with Phoebe, there was no need for Phoebe to help Han Shuo at all. However, when Emily learned from Han Shuo that Phoebe was a swordmaster, she included Phoebe in her plans based on the principle of not letting things go to waste. The reason was that Phoebe had already been implicated, and this would be a good way to explain things to her in the future. While Han Shuo was discussing things with Belinda and Lawrence, Emily had also made an appearance to find Phoebe and Candace. No one knew how she persuaded them, but both Phoebe and Candace readily agreed to Emily's invitation and joined the operation this time. When Han Shuo returned to Elaine's hotel from Lawrence's place and was about to find Phoebe, he ran into the great druid Caspian along the way. Han Shuo didn't think much of it and nodded to Caspian, intending to pass him and leave. Wait a moment. Caspian suddenly called out at this moment. Han Shuo was startled and turned to look at Caspian in confusion. He smiled. Elder, is there something you need from me? Nodding with a smile, Caspian said in the hallway, if you don't mind, can you come with me to my room? I have a favor to ask of you. It was all thanks to Caspian's help last time at Elaine's hotel. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy for Han Shuo to rescue Emily from Belinda's group of 4, much less capture Belinda alive. Han Shuo nodded straightforwardly and said with a smile, no problem. Han Shuo followed Caspian to the room he was staying in after speaking. There wasn't anything special about this room, but when Han Shuo walked in, he could feel that some of the decorations in the room blossomed with vigorous vitality. Big scoundrel, why are you here? The little elf, Angelica, seemed to be meditating on a bed in the room. She opened her bright eyes when she heard the door open and couldn't help but cry out when she saw Han Shuo. Don't be so rude, Angelica. You need to know how to respect others, or others won't respect you. The druid Caspian glared sternly at Angelica and lectured. Got it, Grandpa. Angelica stuck out her tongue and made a face at Caspian, scolding, speaking a bit timidly. When they arrived, Han Shuo sat down on a chair in the living room at Caspian's instructions. Angelica didn't continue meditating at this time. She hopped down from the bed and walked into the living room, her bright eyes looking at Han Shuo with great interest. Elder, do you have any instructions? Han Shuo sat down and looked at Caspian with a slight smile. You're too courteous. It's not instructions. I just want to ask you for a favor, but I don't know if it'll be too much trouble for you. Caspian had a benevolent smile on his face as he looked at Han Shuo. Tomorrow night, Han Shuo planned on moving out with Emily and the others. If Caspian wanted to affect Han Shuo's movements, then Han Shuo wouldn't be able to agree. Therefore, Han Shuo said honestly, please tell me first. If I can help you, I definitely won't refuse. However, I also have matters to attend to this time, and hope that the elder will forgive me if I can't leave. Caspian nodded understandingly when he heard Han Shuo's words. He then mused for a moment and pointed at Angelica. I'm going out today and will be back by tomorrow at the latest. However, I can't bring Angelica with me. I hope that you can help me take care of Angelica between today and tomorrow and ensure that her safety won't be threatened. Han Shuo wouldn't be moving out until tomorrow night. Han Shuo had already arranged many things. Han Shuo really didn't have anything particularly important to do between today and tomorrow. Even if there were some urgent matters, there were still Emily, Phoebe, and the others who could use them. Therefore, Han Shuo only thought for a moment after Caspian's words and readily agreed. He smiled, no problem. I really don't have anything important to do at this time. Valen City has been very chaotic recently, so you must be careful if you head out. With Caspian's strength, he must be doing something very dangerous if he insisted on leaving the hotel at this time and couldn't bring Angelica with him. He must be afraid of endangering Angelica's life, which was why he didn't bring her with him. This was why Han Shuo had kindly reminded him, Grandpa, you must be going to find that enemy for a duel. Take me with you. I've practiced magic for so long. I can help you deal with him. Angelica obviously knew a bit about Caspian. Her little face immediately changed when she heard these words, and she reached out to grab Caspian's arm, begging anxiously. No, you can't go. A duel is a matter between two people. If I take you with me, it'll be against the rules. Caspian loved Angelica dearly, but he obviously wouldn't budge on this matter. He firmly refused her suggestion. In actuality, Han Shuo understood from Caspian's words and tone that Caspian didn't want to take Angelica with him. That was because he didn't want Angelica to take the risk with him. Saying that it was against the rules was just an excuse for Angelica. But the enemy might not follow the rules. Angelica cried out anxiously and then looked at Han Shuo. She suddenly said, although this person is bad, his strength isn't bad. Why don't you let him help you? I'll protect myself. No matter what the other does, Grandpa will never break the rules. Are you not even going to listen to Grandpa's words? Caspian's brow furrowed as he glared at Angelica. Angelica and Caspian looked at each other stubbornly for a while, and finally gave in. She said with an abnormally worried and tearful face, Then, you must be careful. I will. Caspian answered Angelica, and then said to Han Shuo, Then I'll be troubling you. Caspian nodded gratefully at Han Shuo after saying these words and walked towards the door, pushing it open and leaving. Han Shuo discovered that Angelica was still yelling as soon as he walked out of the room. In order to prevent her from attracting too much attention, Han Shuo extended his right hand and covered Angelica's little mouth. Angelica's loud cries then turned into low whimpers, as if she was being held hostage by Han Shuo. Put her down. Just as Han Shuo was about to reach Candace's room, a few people from the Battlefire mercenary band suddenly walked out from the two sides of Candace's room. They looked at Han Shuo with unkind expressions, and one of them, a burly swordsman with short, steel needle-like hair and a sword on his back, shouted coldly at Han Shuo. Isn't he the one who spoke with the vice chief outside the city? One of the journeyman mages recognized Han Shuo with a glance and said in surprise, "No matter what relationship he has with the vice chief, his actions of taking a girl hostage in public has angered me. I can't just watch him take that pitiful little elf away." The burly senior swordsman spoke very righteously and glared at Han Shuo with his bell-like eyes. He slowly took out a long sword from his back and pointed it at Han Shuo. Han Shuo was speechless. Candace's room door was also opened at this time, and a confused Candace and Phoebe walked out. The two didn't know what had happened, and their eyes focused on Han Shuo. It was Candace who asked with surprise, "What's wrong, Brian? Why did you grab little Angelica?" "Nothing much. Her grandfather has gone out on business and asked me to protect her. I just want to make sure that she'll always stay by my side." Han Shuo shrugged and responded easily, "Davis, this is just a misunderstanding. Don't be so nervous." Candace laughed lightly and spoke to the burly senior swordsman. "His words are useless. Only that beautiful elf girl's words can prove his innocence." For some reason, Davis was still quite stubborn after hearing Candace's words. His large eyes stared blankly at the little elf Angelica, whose mouth had been covered by Han Shuo. Han Shuo immediately released the hand covering Angelica's mouth when he spoke and said to Angelica, "All right, stop messing around. Tell him that I only want to protect you." Angelica's clear curses once again rang out when Han Shuo released his hand. She glared angrily at Han Shuo and said hatefully, "Big bad guy, you're holding me hostage. You're holding me hostage." Davis flew into a rage when Angelica's words left her mouth. He pointed the long sword in his hand at Han Shuo and said righteously, "Release her immediately, or you'll regret it." "All right, Davis, can't you see that Angelica is just messing around? If there's nothing else, why don't you go back to your room and recover your strength? Don't meddle in matters that have nothing to do with you." Candace's face grew cold and looked quite imposing. Her bright eyes widened as she glared angrily at Davis. Perhaps Davis was used to Candace's berating, but he seemed to be a bit timid at first. However, when he looked at Angelica, courage came out of nowhere and he stuck out his chest, saying, "Madam Candace, if your suggestion is wrong, I won't listen." Han Shuo was quite amused at this moment. Han Shuo discovered that there was a different kind of heat in Davis's gaze when he looked at Angelica. Han Shuo's heart moved, and he already had an idea of what was going on. Chuckling strangely, Han Shuo said, "So that's how it is. It looks like this brave mercenary wants to be a hero in front of the little beauty. Perhaps he has other thoughts in mind." Candace and Phoebe, as well as the mercenaries on the side, all looked at Davis strangely after these words were spoken. Even the little elf Angelica was startled and looked at Davis with a bit of astonishment. At this moment, Davis's face reddened and he awkwardly defended himself. "No, no such thing." Han Shuo loosened his grip on Angelica and put her down. He spread his hands and said, "All right, I won't continue to hold you hostage. There's a hero here who wants to save the damsel in distress, so I'll fulfill his wish. Little Angelica, you've already been saved. Let your hero save you. I won't bother with you anymore." After saying these words, Han Shuo walked towards Candace and Phoebe with a relaxed expression. He didn't even look at Angelica, as if he'd completely forgotten what he'd promised her grandfather. Hello, you're safe now." Davis walked towards Angelica at this moment and spoke with a bit of a disdainful tone in contrast to his previous righteous attitude towards Han Shuo. "What does that have to do with you, big dumb bear? I'm happy to be held hostage by him. What can you do about it?" Angelica suddenly panicked when she saw that Han Shuo wasn't paying attention to her. When she saw Davis walking over with a licking face, her instincts made her angry no matter how she looked at it. She immediately opened her mouth to speak angrily. The expression on Davis's face suddenly became quite peculiar, as if someone had stepped on his face with a dirty shoe. There was an unspeakable bitterness and embarrassment. "Big bad guy, you promised my grandfather that you'd take care of me. You're not allowed to leave." After yelling at Davis, the little elf Angelica lifted her little flower dress and sprinted towards Han Shuo. She shouted loudly as she ran, as if she was afraid that Han Shuo would ignore her. As for Davis, he didn't even spare him a glance. Candace glared at Davis when she saw that he was still standing there with a wry smile on his face. She said unhappily, "Get back to your room and don't embarrass me. If you want to be a hero and save a damsel in distress, you should first see clearly if the beauty is willing to be captured by the devil. You don't know anything and just randomly save her. You deserve to make a fool of yourself." When Candace said these words, the shamefaced Davis let out a long sigh and walked back to his room with his tail between his legs. This kind of matter was indeed a bit complicated for his brain. Even now, he still couldn't understand why Angelica, who'd had a face full of indignation and unwillingness just a moment ago, had turned into a pitiful begging when Han Shuo let go of her and left in a carefree and unrestrained manner. Chapter 179. Angelica finally followed Han Shuo into Candace's room. Han Shuo chatted with Candace and Phoebe for a while, learning that Emily had gone out to take care of business. With Candace and Phoebe here, Han Shuo didn't need to worry about Angelica's safety. He excused himself with business and returned to his room, silently practicing another high-level necromancy magic, Hate Warrior Summoning. With Clarendon's many years of memories and Han Shuo's unyielding spirit, he finally grasped the art of summoning a hate warrior after a few hours of torment. He summoned a hate warrior wielding a metal rod from the other dimension to his front. This hate warrior's summoning consumed quite a bit of Han Shuo's mental strength. He meditated for a while and felt his mental strength rapidly recover. He then used the transportation matrix to return to the cemetery of death. "Evil master, shouldn't you be taking me out of here this time?" Gilbert started yelling loudly when Han Shuo appeared. "That's right, I'm really going to take you out of here this time," Han Shuo said with a smile when he saw Gilbert walk over dejectedly. When he heard that he could leave the cemetery of death, the dejection on Gilbert's face was instantly replaced by excitement, and a string of flattery flowed out. "All right, make your preparations. We'll be leaving in a bit," Han Shuo said impatiently and quickly walked to the place where he was refining the Earth Elite zombie. He discovered that the Earth Chi was flowing more and more slowly towards the center. It looked like all the Earth Chi in the Cemetery of Death was about to be absorbed by the Earth Elite zombie that was about to evolve. On the other side of the Een Demon Cave, the Wraiths were still fighting and devouring each other, fighting over the 3 drops of blood essence that Han Shuo had dropped. Because his strength had already reached the true demon realm, Han Shuo's demonic yuan had already undergone a qualitative change. Coupled with the support of 3 drops of blood essence, he could maintain the Een Demon Cave for a long time. Han Shuo didn't need to inject demonic yuan every day like when he was refining the original demons. Seeing that everything was normal in the Cemetery of Death, Han Shuo didn't continue to stay here. After giving the little lewd dragon Gilbert a few reminders, he left with him. After returning to Elaine's hotel, Han Shuo let Gilbert stay in the room while he practiced his demonic arts for the whole night, adjusting his state to its peak. On the afternoon of the second day, Han Shuo shut himself in his room and ordered Gilbert not to take a single step out. In a single day, Han Shuo had mastered the advanced necromancy magic, Corpse Explosion. When it was almost evening, Gilbert couldn't bear it any longer and yelled at Han Shuo, "What the hell is this place? I've been staying here ever since I came out of that place. I'm about to get sick from the boredom." Han Shuo, who was meditating, suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and opened his deep eyes. He looked at Gilbert. "All right, we'll leave this place immediately. When we leave, shut up for the rest of the journey and do whatever I want you to do. If you dare act on your own, I'll leave you in the Cemetery of Death forever." What are we doing tonight?" "Haha, honored master, don't worry, I won't be a burden to you. Gilbert immediately responded with great excitement when he heard Han Shua's words. Footsteps sounded from outside at this moment, and then Emily's voice sounded from outside. Are you inside? When he heard that it was Emily, Han Shua immediately stood up and opened the door. How is it? Has everything been settled? Emily's beautiful figure was revealed when the door opened. Gilbert's eyes lit up and he suddenly whistled, saying excitedly, "A beauty, a great beauty." Shut up. Han Shua turned his head and glared fiercely at Gilbert. Gilbert didn't dare open his mouth after being scolded by Han Shua, but his eyes darted shiftily at Emily and then looked at Han Shua with a face full of envy. Who is he? Emily didn't know of Gilbert's existence and couldn't help but ask Han Shua in surprise when she saw him suddenly appear next to Han Shua. He's one of us. There won't be any problems. He'll move with us, and his strength will be of great help to us, Han Shua explained. Although Gilbert was only a young dark dragon, he possessed great destructive power when he transformed into a dragon. If a dark dragon appeared at a critical juncture, it would greatly increase the safety of Han Shua and the others. Emily never doubted Han Shua's words. Gilbert's appearance only gave Emily a deeper understanding of Han Shua's mysteriousness, and she didn't question Han Shua's methods. The great druid Caspian hasn't returned yet, and the little elf Angelica is very worried. This time, it's not related to the Battlefire mercenary band, so apart from Candace, no one else knows of our identities or our movements. When we first arrived, Candace temporarily entrusted Angelica to the other members of the Battlefire mercenary band to look after her. That senior swordsman named Davis seemed very happy to do it, so you don't have to worry about Angelica's safety. It looked like Emily must have heard about the small friction between her and Davis from Phoebe and Candace, which was why she'd said this to Han Shua. All right, since that's the case, let's leave. Han Shua thought for a moment and said. The fact that the great druid Caspian still hadn't returned meant that something must have happened. However, Han Shua didn't have a deep relationship with Caspian and naturally wouldn't delay the important matters that he'd been planning for so long for Caspian. Bob Asher, who wasn't young anymore, had lost 2 sons in a row in the span of a few months. This matter had greatly affected him. As the true master of Valence City, Clark's death still required a funeral according to the rules. All sorts of luxurious carriages were parked in front of Asher's manor. None of the people with status in Valence City dared not give face at this time. No matter how busy they were at home, they still took the time to comfort old Asher's wounded heart. So we're here to attend the funeral. Gilbert stood in a remote corner in front of the door and stood shoulder to shoulder with Han Shua and Emily, complaining with flagging interest. No, we're here to cause trouble. Han Shua chuckled lowly and said, if you successfully complete the mission today, I'll reward you with a few things. Work hard. When he heard that they were here to cause trouble and that there might even be a reward tonight, Gilbert's spirits immediately rose again. He laughed heartily and wanted to walk inside, but Han Shua grabbed him back. Since we're here to cause trouble, of course we can't go through the front door, idiot. Han Shua chided Gilbert with a bad temper and nodded at Emily. The three circled around and arrived at the other side of the manor where there was no one. Even some of the important corners of Asher's manor are protected by magic barriers. However, there shouldn't be any problems going through from here, but we still need to be careful. I'll go up and take a look. Emily spoke softly and used the levitation spell that only archmages could grasp to slowly rise into the air. She landed on top of the high wall and looked around, gesturing to Han Shua. Can you still fly? Han Shua was about to move when he glanced at Gilbert and asked. Shaking his head, Gilbert said honestly, unless I return to my original state, I won't be able to fly over. You've become a burden from the start. Han Shua looked at Gilbert with disdain and reached out to grab him by the neck. He used the art of the demonic ninth heavens to bring him into the air and landed next to Emily with a whoosh, landing shoulder to shoulder with Emily. The group of three flew down from the high wall, with Han Shua and Gilbert following behind Emily. They passed through 2 corridors and a rock garden before appearing in the lively area of the manor with their usual expressions. The 3 of them had changed their clothes long before they'd arrived. Emily had smeared some magical medicine on her face, and her entire appearance had changed greatly. Even Han Shuo almost didn't recognize her. The three of them walked into the crowd and appeared to be dressed the same as the other guests in the manor. Therefore, they didn't stand out too much and no one made trouble for them. Wow, so many women, so many beautiful women. Gilbert was a bit excited as his eyes roamed about lecherously. He called out to Han Shuo beside him in a low voice. "Watch your image, Gilbert." Han Shuo cursed lowly as his eyes also roamed about. He suddenly saw Belinda and Johnny of the Calamity Church appear in the crowd. Lawrence, who'd changed his appearance using magical medicine, was also mixed in with the crowd. He even waved at Han Shuo when he saw Han Shuo appear. Phoebe and Candace had been arranged by Emily to stay in another place. If the Calamity Church made a move, they would cooperate and set fire to the surroundings, planning on throwing the manor into complete chaos. Add to that the changes to the defenses of Lawrence's trusted aides, the manor's defenses would be at their most lax. Han Shuo and Emily would then take the opportunity to investigate Asher's secret room. Gilbert was quite excited when he saw that Emily seemed to know about the Black Dragon City. He puffed out his chest and said in a deep voice, "That's right. I am the future legend of the Black Dragon City. He's not my slave, but my magical pet. Their natures are more or less the same." Han Shuo smiled faintly at the astonished Emily and explained lightly. Gilbert's face immediately fell when he heard these words. As a dark dragon, being tamed as a magical pet wasn't something to be proud of. However, this was the truth and Gilbert couldn't defend himself. He could only hang his head and sigh dejectedly, saying, "What bad luck. I was surrounded by so many people the first time I left home. Otherwise, why would I be afraid of you?" Emily hadn't quite believed it at first, but when she heard Han Shuo and Gilbert's conversation, the astonishment on her face intensified. Her bright eyes stared fixedly at Han Shuo and she asked in a trembling voice, Is he really a dark dragon?" Nodding his head, Han Shuo confirmed for her with great certainty, "Indeed, this stupid dragon was besieged by a large dark elf family. That dark elf family paid a terrible price and heavily injured him. I took advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. I'd planned on killing him and taking his magical crystals and the like, but he didn't have the slightest bit of a dark dragon's moral integrity and shamelessly insisted on signing a master-servant contract with me, becoming my magical pet. Hee, dark dragons are the most evil and shameless of dragons. What moral integrity do they have?" Emily was quite delighted by Han Shuo's explanation. She glanced at the unlucky Gilbert and giggled mockingly. So beautiful women can be so annoying sometimes. Gilbert was quite angry as he glared at Emily and said hatefully. Just at this moment, a sharp and piercing scream suddenly rang out. Following that, all sorts of chaotic footsteps and loud shouts suddenly erupted, mixed with the neighing of horses and the violent clashing of weapons. The Calamity Church has made their move. We still don't know why the Calamity Church wants to kill Bob Asher and what grudge they have against each other. Emily's face lit up with joy as she exclaimed lowly with excitement. Chuckling coldly, Han Shuo said sinisterly, "In my opinion, whether or not the Calamity Church succeeds this time, Johnny and Belinda will be heavily injured even if they don't die. We'll capture them when the time comes and slowly interrogate them." "Master, you're too treacherous and shameless." Gilbert couldn't help but exclaim lowly with excitement when he saw that Han Shuo was prepared to deal with his allies from the start. "Gilbert, are you mocking me?" Han Shuo frowned and flicked a glance at Gilbert, speaking coldly. Shaking his head, Gilbert hastily cried out, No, I'm praising you. Your methods are the same as my brave and wise grandfather's teachings. You've deeply grasped the essence of our dark dragon's fine traditions." Emily had just said that dark dragons were evil and shameless dragons. Han Shuo finally understood why Emily would say that after hearing Gilbert's words. However, Gilbert's praise for him was obviously cursing him as well. Before Han Shuo could teach Gilbert a lesson, Several places in the chaotic manor suddenly burst into flames. All sorts of panicked shouts rang out from the already chaotic manor as the Griffin Legion guards came and went in a flurry of activity. Phoebe and Candace have also made their move. We can make our move now. Han Shua stopped bickering with Gilbert, and his expression grew solemn as he stared at the Griffin Legion soldiers surrounding Bob Asher's room. Emily's expression was also solemn. She took out her magic staff and chanted a dark magic spell in a low voice. A few black shadows that looked like demons began to silently approach the guards. The demon's lair edge danced gracefully in the darkness according to Han Shua's will, quickly flashing towards a person in front of the door. Just as the demon's lair edge was about to approach and that person might discover it, Han Shua's magical yuan abruptly exploded as the demon's lair edge's slow forward speed suddenly increased. With a shrill whistle, the demon's lair edge pierced through the neck of the guard who'd just woken up. "Assassin!" Someone sharply cried out. 7 or 8 Griffin Legion soldiers hastily raised the longswords and spears in their hands, prepared to deal with any danger that might appear at any moment. Emily's dark magic only landed on the bodies of the first 2 Griffin Legion guards, causing their bodies to split open and bleeding profusely. They collapsed limply after a while. The 5 more vigilant guards behind them released their fighting aura in time and destroyed the effects of the magic. They weren't harmed at all. Due to the arrangements of Lawrence's trusted aides, everyone else had long since retreated. No one would be able to hear them no matter how much they shouted. Therefore, after the attack, Han Shua and the other 2 didn't continue to conceal themselves and directly charged out from the shadows. Contrary to Emily's expectations, Gilbert was the fastest. Even in human form, the strength of a dark dragon's body was still unimaginable to ordinary people. Gilbert was the first to rush out excitedly. His entire person was like a bulldozer as he grabbed the spear of the guard that Han Shua had just killed and fiercely stabbed towards the first person. Although he was a journeyman swordsman and emitted an extraordinary fighting aura, his entire body was instantly pierced through by the spear and thrown far away to the side, dying on the spot. When his fighting aura landed on Gilbert's body, it only caused Gilbert to make a muffled grunt. It didn't cause any damage to Gilbert's physical body. Emily was obviously startled by this attack and truly acknowledged Gilbert's identity as a dark dragon. Han Shua had long since known that this would happen and wasn't surprised at all. He slowly walked over with a calm expression, his mind controlling the demon's lair edge to dance wildly and kill 2 more Griffin Legion soldiers in a dazzling pattern. The strength of these soldiers were mostly mid to advanced swordsmen and knights, which was actually quite good. Their duty was to defend this area and also to call out to more experts when they encountered an enemy. If it wasn't for the fact that Lawrence had trusted aides in the Griffin Legion and had already evacuated the surrounding troops, the first assassin shout would have been able to summon several large groups of Griffin Legion soldiers. If that really happened, Han Shua and the other 2 would only be able to flee for their lives. The remaining 2 guards finally fell under another attack of Emily's dark magic. Han Shua instructed Gilbert when he saw that the obstacles had been cleared. "Stay here and keep watch. Let us know if there's any movement." Han Shua shot Emily a look after saying this, and the 2 carefully pushed open the door and walked into Bob Asher's room. Bob Asher's room was decorated in an opulent and extravagant manner. Some of the furniture and decorations within were extremely valuable. The carpet was soft and smooth, likely made from the fur of an extremely rare magical creature. The wall lamps and oil paintings in the surroundings were all priceless. This Bob Asher really knows how to enjoy life. Just from the decorations in this room, it's obvious that his income isn't clean enough. Han Shua's eyes scanned the surroundings as he walked in and immediately opened his mouth to speak. Of course. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to live in such a place with just his status as the commander of the Griffin Legion. Emily nodded and walked directly into the room as she conversed with Han Shua. There was a mechanism in Bob Asher's room that led directly to another secret room. This was information that the Dark Mantle had paid a great price to obtain. Han Shua and Emily went straight to the room as soon as they entered. As soon as AI Mealy came in, she immediately lifted the blanket on the big bed in this room. Then, she reached out and fumbled around the edge of the bed for a while. who knew what she was fiddling with. Suddenly, a hole with a flight of stairs appeared on the bedboard in this bedroom. In the Lancelot Empire, the Dark Mantle can basically find out anything we want. Although this secret room is very well hidden, Bob Asher will bring his mistress in to flaunt his greatness, so we can still find out about the existence of this place and the way in. Emily smiled at Han Shuo and explained before going down. Nodding, Han Shuo smiled to express his understanding. Indeed, someone like Bob Asher will indeed find it hard to control his desire to flaunt. If one wants to keep a secret, one must first overcome that obstacle of their own. Let's go. Let's go take a look at Bob Asher's room and see what's in there, Emily said. Han Shuo followed behind her and went deeper into the underground passageway. He suddenly heard the faint sound of breathing before he reached the bottom of the ground. There's someone down there. Be careful. Han Shuo's heart tightened as he pulled Emily and spoke softly, walking even more carefully inside. When the two landed on the ground, Han Shuo looked towards the source of the breathing and suddenly discovered a cage with a magical boundary. The druid Caspian was tightly bound within the cage and was looking at Han Shuo and Emily with a look of pleasant surprise. Chapter 181. It was a square cage with crackling lightning crackling around it. Caspian's hands and feet were bound by metal chains. The chains gave off an icy chill, freezing his body and making it difficult for him to even breathe. Han Shuo and Emily were both startled when they saw Caspian and quickly walked towards him. Emily only observed for a moment before saying lowly, "There's a lightning and water magical boundary set up to restrict his strength. I'll need some time to undo it." Han Shuo swept a glance at Caspian, whose hair and beard were about to freeze, and said, "My weapon is very sharp. I'm confident that I can use it to break through the cage." Shaking her head with a serious expression, Emily extended a hand to stop Han Shuo's movements. She explained, "This lightning and water magical boundary is set up very cleverly. If you don't know the technique and forcefully use the sharpness of your weapon to break through the cage, it's possible that he'll be electrocuted or frozen to death immediately." Necromancy magic was different from the other majors, and Han Shuo's understanding of magic was a bit lacking compared to Emily's. Han Shuo didn't insist on his own opinion after hearing her words and said, "All right then, you're in charge of undoing the boundary. I'll look for some evidence of Bob Asher's crimes." Han Shuo didn't look at Emily any longer after he'd finished speaking and began to carefully survey his surroundings. The secret room wasn't particularly spacious, and there were many cabinets of various sizes with many strange items on them. One of the cabinets had many shiny metals on it. There were markings on these metals that explained the meaning of each metal. These were all the various awards that Bob Asher had received in his many years in the army. These kinds of awards and medals had helped him become the commander of the Griffin Legion, a glory that he could brag about for the rest of his life. There was also a cabinet with some knight armors and weapons on it. Some of these armors and weapons were still shining, and some were obviously damaged. Below each armor and weapon was a thin piece of paper, which recorded the battle in which the armor and weapon were worn. There were also a few cabinets of various sizes, some containing ancient books, some containing obviously valuable longswords and spears, but there were no jewels or beautiful jade like Han Shuo had imagined. A person of Bob Asher's status wouldn't keep those vulgar treasures in a secret room like this. Don't even think about it. For him, wealth is no longer something he should pursue. The things here symbolize his glory and memories. They are not something gold coins can compare to. In the distance, Emily was currently dispelling the boundary that imprisoned Caspian. She unintentionally flicked a glance at Han Shuo and discovered that Han Shuo didn't seem to care about these things at all. He seemed to be a bit dispirited. She couldn't help but speak up. Han Shuo sighed dejectedly when he heard Emily's reminder. "I'd thought that there would be countless gold coins and riches in his secret room. I'd even planned on rewarding Gilbert after the mission was completed. It seems that I've been ignorant and ill-informed. Hurry up and look for other things. We need evidence that will make it hard for him to turn over a new leaf." Emily rolled her eyes at Han Shuo and urged Han Shuo, Taking a deep breath in, Han Shuo calmed his mind and quickly paced around the cabinets, carefully digging out any secrets that might exist. However, after Han Shuo had searched all the cabinets, Han Shuo still didn't find anything of value. There doesn't seem to be anything. Han Shuo spread out his hands and said a bit helplessly when he walked up to Emily. Wait a moment. Emily was obviously at a critical juncture at this moment. A shadowy ball of magic suddenly pressed onto the cage in her hands. Two crisp sounds rang out as the ball of magic in Emily's hands pressed onto the cage. The crackling lightning on the cage disappeared in an instant. Even Caspian, who was in the cage, was no longer shivering as much as before. All right, I've dispelled the magical boundaries within the cage. You can use your weapon to rescue him now. Leave the matter of finding evidence to me. I've been in the dark mantle for so long, and I'm best at this sort of work. Emily breathed out lightly and turned back to smile sweetly at Han Shuo, her body slowly moving towards the cabinets. Thank you. Caspian's trembling body had warmed up due to the dispelling of the two magical boundaries. He trembled as he thanked Han Shuo. Hehe, I can only say that you're quite lucky to have run into us. Han Shuo said with a smile as he took out the Demon's Lair edge and held it in his hand. He infused magical yuan into it and slashed it with force. Creak. Several of the dark iron pillars of the cage were instantly broken by the Demon's Lair edge's incisive slash. Han Shuo reached out and twisted with force, pulling the iron pillars to the side. Caspian walked out from within. Caspian hurriedly stretched out his body as soon as he walked out, then exhaled 2 hot breaths of air and said to Han Shuo, How is Angelica? Is she in danger? Don't worry. We asked the Battlefire mercenary band to protect her before we left. I think she'll be fine, but Angelica is very worried about you. Han Shuo turned his head to look at Emily after saying this, not asking why Caspian was imprisoned here. On the other side, Emily took out some magical device and fiddled with it. She actually opened up a secret compartment in the corner of the wall and rummaged through it, taking out a small scroll. Hehe, found it. Most secret rooms have secret compartments that are concealed using space magic. Ordinary people would find it hard to discover, unless they're a space grand magus. Only then can they sense some magical pulses and remove the disguise. However, we do this too often and even have specialized magic search tools. I can sense the weakest magical pulses in this room through this little thing and obtain everything we need. Emily said proudly to Han Shuo after grasping the small scroll in her hand. So you're saying that our mission this time is complete? Han Shuo paused and then asked with a smile. Nodding, Emily was quite happy as she smiled. That's right. As long as we can leave Valen City, Bob Asher will be in big trouble this time. Dong dong dong. At this moment, rapid knocking sounds came from above. Han Shuo and Emily looked at each other, their expressions changing. Han Shuo said lowly, This is Gilbert's signal. This means that someone must have discovered the changes here and is rushing over. We need to hurry up and leave this place. Emily took the lead and headed back the way they'd come after saying these words. Caspian had just come out of his cage and seemed to have yet to fully recover. His face was still deathly pale and his gait was a bit stiff. Han Shuo moved quickly to Caspian's side and grabbed him on his back, rushing out with him on his back. He followed Emily and returned to Bob Asher's bedroom. They just landed on the bed when they heard the sounds of fierce fighting in front of the door. Emily and Han Shuo looked at each other, Emily reaching out to touch the edge of the bed. Asher's bed returned to its original state, and the two quickly made their way outside. Gilbert stood in front of the door with a spear in his hand, fending off the attacks of several Griffin Legion soldiers. Another group of Griffin Legion soldiers were rushing over from the distance, some of them wielding longbows and arrows as they found suitable positions, already planning on taking aim at Gilbert. My honored master, you've finally come out. I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to hold out much longer if it had been just a bit longer. Gilbert called out loudly as he took a step back and blocked an attack with his spear when he saw Han Shuo appear. Han Shuo, Emily, and Gilbert were all masked, making it impossible to make out their appearances. It was obvious that they were up to no good. Even the great druid Caspian had been covered by a black mask before he'd been carried out by Han Shuo, making him look like a thieving thief. "Hurry up and run." Han Shuo called out softly when he saw more and more Griffin Legion soldiers converging on them. He immediately found a path to charge out before they'd formed an encirclement. The longbowmen and crossbowmen were ready at this time. Han Shuo and Emily would become live targets without any cover if they took to the skies, so they had no choice but to use some of the fake mountains and trees in the manor as cover. Gilbert didn't waste any more words and rushed out behind Han Shuo without even a nod. The entire manor was ablaze by this time, and screams rang out incessantly. Belinda and Johnny blasted through a wall with the golem that looked like a three-eyed god leading the way and also ran for their lives. Johnny had an arrow stuck in his butt, and there was a pool of blood on his chest. It looked like he'd been injured. This way. When Belinda saw Han Shuo and the others, she waved her hand with the spirit of brotherhood, indicating for Han Shuo to run with them. However, Han Shuo paid no attention to her and immediately changed directions when he saw her wave her hand. He dashed towards another wall and called out lowly, "Are you kidding? There are even more people chasing after you. Wouldn't it be suicide for me to go with you?" Chapter 182. The entire manor was in a state of chaos as the surrounding houses were set ablaze. Panicked screams rose and fell as several groups of masked men in black ran for their lives. The Griffin Legion soldiers chased after them, throwing the manor into complete chaos. "Wait for us." Just as Han Shuo, Emily, and Selena were fleeing in another direction, two slim figures in black suddenly appeared. One of them hastily called out. Han Shuo knew that this was Phoebe when he heard the voice. The other person was Candace. The two of them had been setting fire to the houses since the chaos had begun. As a fire element magical swordsman, Candace was very familiar with this sort of thing. After a while, the entire manor had been turned into a sea of flames. Behind the two of them were several squads of Griffin Legion soldiers, as well as an old man with a grave expression and an overbearing aura. He wielded a long sword that radiated with silver fighting aura. This person quickly flew over. His sharp aura caused people to not dare to look directly at him. The large sword in his hand gently swung. Wherever the silver dochi passed, all the obstacles in front of him, including some trees and rocks, were all shattered into fine powder. Even the ground that was cut by the silver dochi split open and formed many gullies. Its power was terrifying to the extreme. "He's Clark's master, Great Swordmaster Gabriel. Let's get out of here quickly." Candace was anxious as she called out and rushed towards Han Shuo at an even faster speed. Gabriel's speed was exceedingly fast, far surpassing the Griffin Legion soldiers behind him. As a great swordmaster, Gabriel's strength was exceedingly frightening. Han Shuo only needed one glance to know that no one on his side could stop him in a one-on-one fight. Han Shuo's expression tensed as he saw Gabriel's speed increase and was about to catch up to Phoebe and Candace. He looked at Gilbert beside him and suddenly thought of how terrifying Gilbert was after transforming into a dark dragon. He immediately called out coldly, "Damn it, hurry up and transform." At the same time, Han Shuo's attention was unprecedentedly focused as he used his mind to control the Demon's Lair edge, whistling fiercely as it danced towards Great Swordmaster Gabriel. Magical yuan wildly surged into the Demon's Lair edge and exploded out with a thick, demonic aura, mixed with a strange aura of scorching heat and cold. The Demon's Lair edge whistled through the air and appeared directly in front of the Great Swordmaster Gabriel, thrusting towards him. That strange cold and heat brought with it an aura of extreme danger, causing Gabriel to be startled. Snorting coldly, Gabriel suddenly waved the long sword in his hand. A cloud of silver fireworks suddenly blossomed in the air in front of him, as if a sky full of stars had shattered into specks of starlight. Han Shuo, who was controlling the Demon's Lair edge, suddenly felt an enormous force emanate from that ball of gorgeous silver light, tightly sucking the Demon's Lair edge that was attempting to stab at Gabriel. An enormous force suddenly surged into the Demon's Lair edge. Gabriel's silver fighting aura was exceedingly domineering as it crashed onto the demon's lair edge, as if wanting to destroy everything in its path. The demon's lair edge buzzed within the ball of silver light. This domineering force entangled the demon's lair edge in an exceedingly short amount of time, mixing together with the scorching cold demonic aura created by Han Shua's magical yuan. The demonic aura formed by the mystical glacial spellfire quickly dissipated. Cursing inwardly, Han Shua knew that he'd only been training in demonic magic for a short period of time. No matter how wondrous his demonic magic was, a few short months of training was still no match for the fighting aura that Gabriel had painstakingly gathered over decades. It was already unimaginable that the demonic aura within the demon's lair edge hadn't completely dissipated after such a short period of contact. However, because of the demon's lair edge's obstruction, Gabriel's footsteps finally slowed down as he was about to catch up to Phoebe and Candace. The feeling that something was wrong was becoming more and more apparent. The demon's lair edge was actually unable to retract due to the tight bindings. Despite his mental summons, Han Shua couldn't help but be greatly shocked. Thinking quickly for a moment, Han Shua's heart tightened as he focused his mental strength and quickly chanted a magical incantation. 2 bone spears suddenly flew out and shot towards Gabriel. Emily also cast a dark magic spell in the moment that Han Shua made his move. At the same time, Han Shua used all his strength and the magical yuan within his body circulated wildly. He suddenly tightened his mind and took advantage of Gabriel's distraction to deal with Han Shua and Emily's magical attacks to forcibly free the demon's lair edge from the ball of silver light. Because he'd expended too much energy and the speed at which the magical yuan circulated had exceeded the limits of Han Shua's body, Han Shua couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He'd already suffered minor injuries. "You're hurt. Put me down. I think I've recovered." Caspian, who was on Han Shua's back, could clearly feel Han Shua's body tremble violently. He immediately spoke to Han Shua when he saw that Han Shua couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Gabriel had already destroyed Han Shua's bone spears and Emily's dark magic in a short amount of time. A pair of cold gray eyes swept towards Han Shua and Emily at this moment, especially when he looked at Han Shua. He seemed to be extremely curious about Han Shua's magical yuan and the demon's lair edge. Han Shua turned his head to see that Gilbert had already transformed into an enormous dark dragon. Gilbert's body covered in black scales crashed fiercely into the wall in front of Han Shua and the others, collapsing loudly. "All of you, get on his back." Han Shua couldn't help but be overjoyed when he saw Gilbert reveal his dark dragon form. He immediately yelled out and threw Caspian, who was on his back, far away in Gilbert's direction. Han Shua used a gentle force when he did this. When Caspian landed on Gilbert, Caspian's momentum would be slowed down and wouldn't cause too much damage to his body. Other than AI Mealy, who already knew Gilbert's identity, Gilbert's sudden transformation into a black dragon caused everyone here to be instantly shocked. All of them stared at the enormous Gilbert with their mouths agape, and for a moment, their brains were too slow to react. Griffin Knights, all Griffin Knights gather here. Archers, spear wielders, and those with crossbows, get ready. You can all be brave warriors to slay dragons. Gabriel's high-pitched yells suddenly rang out and traveled to the other parts of the manor. "Hurry up and get on." Han Shua couldn't help but yell out again when he saw that Candace and Phoebe were still staring at Gilbert's enormous body with some shock. Dark dragons had always been known as the most evil and greedy of the dragon tribe. They liked to live in the dark and damp underground world, and were shameless and greedy for money. They could be considered the embodiment of evil on the surface. It was normal that Phoebe and Candace couldn't react to the sudden appearance of a dark dragon in a place like this. But when Han Shua urged them a second time, the 2 girls finally recognized the relationship between this dark dragon and Han Shua. They looked at Han Shua in shock and flew onto Gilbert's back at the same time. Han Shua relaxed when he saw that Emily, Candace, Phoebe, and even the druid Caspian had all leapt onto Gilbert's back. He deployed the art of the demonic ninth heavens and flew towards Gilbert as well. He instructed, "Leave immediately, but don't fly high into the air or you'll become a target." "Esteemed master, Please help me block the arrows and spears that are shot at me. Gilbert's mouth was now filled with sharp teeth, and the draconic breath he exhaled carried a strong, pungent odor. His voice also seemed a bit more dignified than before. I know. This place is a mess anyways. If there's anyone in your way, destroy them all. You don't have to worry about anything else as long as we can escape this place. Han Shuo didn't give the Dark Dragon any restraints at all when he heard Han Shuo's instructions. Caspian seemed to feel a bit bad when he heard Han Shuo's instructions, but when he thought of how Han Shuo had already helped him many times, and that Han Shuo was also thinking about the lives of his group, he moved his lips but didn't say anything in the end. Waha, all right then, I won't hold back. Gilbert cheered excitedly amidst his dignified voice. A stream of acidic venom suddenly sprayed out from its fanged maw into the distance. The Griffin Legion archers who'd just gotten into formation all retreated in panic as soon as this dragon breath containing acidic venom shot out. Those who didn't dodge in time had their skin and flesh fester in the blink of an eye after being touched by the acidic venom. It looked like only death awaited them. Dozens of Griffin Knights suddenly appeared in the distance after the dragon breath shot out. They all wielded long silver spears and wore shining silver armor as they flew over on their griffins. The person at the front had a sturdy body and didn't look young. Silver fighting aura shot out from the tip of the spear, making the silver spear with all sorts of complicated patterns seem even longer and narrower. Hurry, Bob Asher is here. It looks like the Calamity Church has indeed failed. Han Shuo turned pale with fright when he saw that the Dark Dragon still wanted to act arrogantly. He stomped on the Dark Dragon's body and hastily gave the order. Chapter 183. Dozens of Griffin Knights, including Bob Asher and Great Swordmaster Gabriel, were present. Little Dark Dragon Gilbert would be courting death if he were to face such a formidable force head-on. Gilbert was quite tactful under Han Shuo's urging. He didn't say a word as he charged out of the hole in the wall. The archers and spearmen who had regained their footing in Gabriel's direction suddenly fired in unison, filling the air with arrows and spears as they flew towards Gilbert. Han Shuo and the others had long since made their preparations. Emily released her dark magic, forming an oval-shaped magic shield in the sky. Han Shuo also chanted the dark mist magic, covering a large area in darkness. Candace, Phoebe, and Caspian all used all sorts of techniques to cut down the arrows that pierced their way. Han Shuo had already suffered some injuries from his previous exchange with Gabriel. It was a good thing that Han Shuo could also use necromancy magic in addition to his magical yuan. As Han Shuo chanted the incantation, several zombie warriors and 2 hate warriors suddenly appeared on the ground, as well as dozens of skeletal warriors, forcibly blocking the hole in the wall that Gilbert had blasted open. These summoned dark creatures acted as meat shields, blocking the hole in the wall and causing many attacks to land on them. Add to that the effects of Emily's magic shield, Han Shuo's dark mist, and Phoebe, Candace, and Caspian's assistance. Gilbert's enormous body wasn't harmed in the slightest. The dark creatures that Han Shuo had summoned were covered in arrows and spears. When the Griffin Legion soldiers drew near, Han Shuo once again chanted the corpse explosion spell that he'd just learned, causing the flesh and blood of 2 hate warriors to fly through the air. The dozen or so soldiers on the side were caught off guard and all fell to the ground. Take to the skies and leave this place as quickly as possible. Taking advantage of the fact that the dark creatures were still blocking the wall and the archers and spearmen were temporarily unable to display their might, Han Shuo abruptly yelled. Gilbert didn't hesitate after hearing Han Shuo's call. His enormous body whipped its tail and 2 houses on the side collapsed, sending boulders flying and trees snapping. Gilbert then yelled loudly for a while as his enormous body, which had been only a few meters above the ground, suddenly shot towards the dark sky. Stop right there. Bob Asher, who was on the back of the griffin, had miraculously charged over at this moment. The silver spear in his hand suddenly shot out like a silver meteor, its tail trailing a brilliant afterglow as it shot towards Gilbert's back. As a skyrider, Bob Asher had been through hundreds of battles over the years and had seen all sorts of situations. Not only was his own strength ferocious, but his battle experience was also incomparably rich. He knew that it wouldn't be easy to catch up to Gilbert with the Griffin's speed. The only way was to injure Gilbert first. Otherwise, even with a large group of Griffin riders behind him, it would be impossible to keep Han Shuo and the others here. This spear had been condensed with Bob Asher's surging fighting aura and was dazzlingly dazzling in the pitch-black night sky. The sharp aura it contained brought enormous pressure to Han Shuo and the others. The spear whistled sharply as it flew over, seeming to borrow the force of the wind. Han Shuo quickly chanted another bone spear incantation, and 2 bone spears abruptly landed on the incoming silver spear according to Han Shuo's will. Just as the 2 bone spears flew towards the silver spear, 2 crisp pa-pa sounds were heard before they shattered. The silver spear's momentum was not hindered at all, and it continued to shoot straight towards him. Just as Han Shuo was startled, Emily chanted a dark magic spell, and the Grim Reaper's scythe once again blossomed in the air. As Emily waved the staff in her hand downwards, the Grim Reaper's scythe formed from dark magic swiftly chopped at the silver spear that continued to shoot towards them. Another burst of popping sounds rang out as Emily's slender figure on Gilbert's body suddenly staggered and involuntarily took a few steps back. The Grim Reaper's scythe formed from her mental strength also turned to dust in the blink of an eye, just like the 2 bone spears Han Shuo had just shot out. But because of Emily's Grim Reaper's scythe, much of the fighting aura on the silver spear had dissipated. Whether it was the dazzling silver light it emitted or the speed at which it attacked, all of it had suddenly decreased. Han Shuo's heart ached at this moment, but he didn't have the time to comfort Emily. His 2 eyes focused unblinkingly on the spear, ready to summon the demon's lair edge at any moment. 2 crossbow bolts suddenly shot out from Phoebe and Candace's hands. Candace's bolt missed, but Phoebe's directly collided with the silver spear that had been weakened. Because of this crossbow bolt, the speed of the spear was once again reduced. Gilbert's speed had increased by this time, and he'd already flown into the horizon in the blink of an eye. He'd left Bob Asher behind on his griffin, and the distance between the 2 was still gradually increasing. Pass down my orders. The entire city is on lockdown. No one is allowed to enter, but not leave. Shut down all the transportation matrices that lead to other cities. No one is allowed to activate them without my orders, or they'll be killed without question. Bob Asher's wild roars traveled far and wide, and even Han Shuo and the others could hear them clearly. Are you all right? Han Shuo's body relaxed when he saw that he was temporarily out of danger, but his expression tightened as he rushed to Emily's side, supporting Emily and asking urgently, I can't give up on my comrade. Candace followed. When Han Shuo looked at Emily, Emily smiled sweetly and said to Han Shuo, Whatever you say. Gilbert, turn around and return to the hotel. After a moment of silence, Han Shuo stomped down on the back of the black dragon and called out lowly. Chapter 184. Gilbert had originally pulled away from Asher and was about to fly out of Valen City's range, but he had no choice but to turn back when he heard Han Shuo's orders. He complained, Honored Master, even the great Gilbert can't stop a Griffin Legion. We'll definitely be discovered if we return to the city with such a large commotion. Cut the crap and fly back to the hotel as fast as possible. We'll pick up the people we need to pick up before we leave. Han Shuo snorted lightly and spoke to Gilbert beneath him. As a dark dragon, there wasn't much space on Gilbert's back for a person to stand on. Even if Han Shuo returned to the hotel, he wouldn't be able to take everyone away at once. He had to start thinking about what to do now. His thoughts raced as he waited for Gilbert to enter Valen City from the outskirts he'd just left. The sharp-eyed Han Shuo had already spotted the Griffin Knights high in the sky, whistling as they patrolled the area. With Gilbert's size, there was no way he'd be able to hide from the Griffin Knights if he wanted to return to the hotel from here. Han Shuo mused for a moment and suddenly opened his mouth. Gilbert, land immediately before the Griffin Knights discover us. We'll return to the hotel from the ground. Gilbert didn't waste any more words under Han Shua's orders and flew a certain distance at a low altitude, allowing everyone to land on his back. When everyone had landed, Gilbert's enormous body gradually shrank under the cover of the black light, finally turning back into the tanned and somewhat handsome young Gilbert. We all wore masks in Aski's manor just now. Now that we're entering the city with our original appearances, they may not be able to recognize us. Han Shua glanced at Emily and said, "Indeed, but if a group of strangers like us appears together and is discovered by the Griffin Legion, they'll definitely become suspicious. I think we should split up so that no one will associate us with anything." Emily looked at everyone and said, "Well, everyone should know the way back. Let's split into 2 groups and go back. If there's any danger in the hotel, we'll meet up at the block behind." Han Shua nodded and agreed to Emily's arrangement. After Han Shua said this, Phoebe naturally stood next to Han Shua. As a magic pet, Gilbert naturally could not be separated from his master. Emily scanned the crowd and spoke again. "Since this is the case, I'll go with Miss Candace and Elder Caspian. Before Elder Caspian enters the city, use a magic potion to disguise his appearance. Otherwise, he'll be easily recognized." Han Shua reminded and said to Phoebe and Gilbert, "Let's go." The current Valence City was even more chaotic than the day of Clark's assassination. The chief of the Griffin Legion had used the invasion of Kasi Empire assassins as an excuse to seal off the entire city. Soldiers of the Griffin Legion whizzed past on the streets and in the sky. They immediately went up to interrogate strangers when they saw them. Under Han Shua's keen eyes and ears, Han Shua's group of 3 took some rugged and complicated paths and weaved through the shadows of rows of eaves, avoiding many Griffin Legion soldiers along the way. Whether it was Gilbert or Phoebe, they were both people with extraordinary strength. Han Shua's powerful memory after developing his brain region was put to full use on this return trip. The various complicated paths within Valence City were like a map reflected in Han Shua's heart. Han Shua's direction was erratic as he made his way back. In the end, Phoebe felt that they were getting further and further away from the hotel. If it wasn't for the fact that Phoebe was well aware of Han Shua's mysteriousness, she would have doubted whether Han Shua was taking the correct path. After taking many small paths and twisting paths, Phoebe and Gilbert were both feeling a bit dizzy and disoriented when the back door of the hotel suddenly appeared in front of them. Han Shua had actually avoided all the Griffin Legion soldiers on the ground and in the sky along the way. Using some complicated paths, the 3 of them didn't encounter any danger and directly appeared in front of the hotel. "This is too miraculous." Phoebe couldn't help but exclaim softly when she saw Elaine's hotel. Her eyes sparkled as she stared at Han Shua in praise. "Honored Master, my head is dizzy from all the twists and turns. How did you remember such complicated paths?" Gilbert also had a look of shock on his face as he looked at Han Shua in disbelief. Pointing at his own head, Han Shua chuckled. "It can remember everything clearly." These words were useless, but even if Han Shua hadn't lied and explained that his brain region had been developed, the 2 of them still wouldn't have been able to understand. Therefore, Han Shua naturally didn't want to say anything more. Han Shua took a deep breath after saying these words. His eyes sparkled with a black light as he focused on Elaine's hotel. His sensitive ears also focused on the hotel after he focused his attention. Contrary to Han Shua's expectations, there was nothing out of the ordinary about the hotel. Han Shua listened for a bit and found that everything was normal inside. There were no sounds of panic, nor were there any sounds of people from the Griffin Legion going over to question them. "You and Gilbert head over first. I'll go find Lawrence and tell them to leave the city as soon as possible," Han Shua said softly as he looked at Phoebe beside him. Phoebe's beautiful face twisted to look at Han Shua, and she reached out a jade hand. She tightened her grip on Han Shua's rough hand and said softly, "Be careful. Don't worry. Nothing will happen to me." Han Shua responded with a smile and said to Gilbert, "If there's danger, protect her." Han Shua was like a shadow in the night as soon as he'd finished speaking, hiding in the darkness behind him and disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Han Shua heard a strange sound on the way to Lawrence's residence. His footsteps quickened as he landed on a tree branch. Han Shuo saw Lawrence and Lucky in disguise, as well as the two swordsmen he'd seen last time. They were actually running in the direction of the hotel with Belinda and Johnny of the Calamity Church. Coughing lightly, Han Shuo suddenly called out softly from atop the tree, "Lawrence." Han Shuo's cough startled the group greatly. They tightly gripped the weapons in their hands and immediately faced the tree, almost directly attacking. "Brian, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you have left the city a long time ago? We clearly saw you ride the Dark Dragon in the manor and leave Asher in the dust." Lawrence looked at Han Shuo with astonishment and said in confusion, "We're back again. Cut the nonsense and meet up at the hotel. We'll leave immediately. We can't stay in Valence City for a moment longer." Han Shuo didn't have the time to explain too much. He casually replied and flew down from the tree, returning to the hotel with Lawrence and the others. Now that he was up close, Han Shuo discovered that not only had Johnny's buttocks been hit, but there was also a large patch of blood on his chest. It looked like his injuries weren't light. Although Belinda still wore a mask, her gaze wasn't as sharp as before. She looked a bit frail and likely had been injured as well. Lawrence and the others had only acted as the mediators in this operation and hadn't participated in the battle. Therefore, they all looked to be in good spirits, and it was obvious that none of them had been injured. However, what Han Shuo couldn't figure out was why he was with Belinda. Han Shuo hadn't allowed them to interact with each other before this operation. Logically speaking, they shouldn't know each other. Hesitating for a moment, Han Shuo couldn't help but ask the questions in his heart. He looked at Belinda and then at Lawrence, asking in confusion, "How did you know each other?" "Oh, it's just that when we were retreating just now, we discovered that we were on the same side, so we walked together." Lawrence looked at Han Shuo as if nothing had happened and explained faintly. Belinda nodded when she heard Lawrence's words. "It was because of Mr. Lawrence's help and the large number of experts chasing after you that we were able to seize the opportunity to escape. So that's how it is." Han Shuo felt that things weren't so simple, but since Belinda and Lawrence had spoken thus, Han Shuo couldn't pry any further. Just as Han Shuo, Lawrence, and the others were about to arrive at the hotel, Han Shuo heard a squad of Griffin Legion soldiers questioning the owner of the hotel, Elaine, from afar. Han Shuo could hear Elaine's hearty laughter even from afar. She didn't seem to be worried about the safety of the hotel at all. However, with his astonishing eyesight, Han Shuo discovered that another soldier seemed to have received some sort of order when the squad was talking to Elaine. He quietly left the hotel and quickly made his way to the street in the distance, waving at the two Griffin Knights circling in the air. "Oh no, we must have been exposed." Although he didn't know why, Han Shuo knew that Elaine's hotel was no longer safe. He called out softly and Han Shuo no longer concealed his tracks as he dashed towards the hotel like a bolt of lightning. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.